I'm doing great. Welcome to the Cult Bar. All right, folks, welcome. Sorry about that whole snafu there, but yeah, welcome to the Cult Bar.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, we should start. Like, this is actually the documentary that made us decide to do the live stream, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, decided just to actually do the show, be like, yeah, let's do this, because it was this kind of kicked off. Thanks to our esteemed leader, Greg Washington, who was like, yeah, why don't you guys, I'd love to see you do this. And we are like, yeah, why don't we do this? And
Right.
so voila. So
here we are.
Yeah. So why don't we, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
This is our 12th one. So it's just over a year because we skipped a month.
Yeah. So there is that. But yeah, I've been super stoked that we jumped back to this bit longer of a docuseries than we normally do. But yeah. So why don't we start with what you're drinking? What do you have in your glass there, Renee?
I have a red wine Merlot that's coming across as very black, but trust me, it's like a Halloween red that I found. Jamaican rum, orange juice, and some orange and apple. And it's very good.
Can you explain why you've chose that?
Because it matches my lipstick, my earrings, and my shirt, and my ring, which matches the colors that the Rajneeshees wear. Just so happens to be a so
you are just all on theme for this. So
oh yeah, this is like my favorite fall color. I was so excited.
Well, yeah. Before we start, fall to you, today it was 27 degrees when I woke up here.
Fall to me, well, it was 71 today. But it has been as low as 63 degrees in the last week.
That's fall. I think that qualifies. Even here in the Northeast, that qualifies. Yeah. So, all right. So what I'm drinking is actually something called a Rolls Royce. And the reason
17 of them.
Yeah. Although at the end they did say they thought he had 90 of them, which is nuts. But so yes, the leader of the cult was very fond of Rolls Royces, so I decided to pick this up. It is, and I'm going to share the screen here. It is 2.5 ounces of gin, half ounce of dry vermouth, half ounce of sweet vermouth, a heavy teaspoon of Benedictine, which I did not get because Benedictine is expensive. So that is excluded from this cocktail because I am not rich. And a dash of orange bitters, which I magically forgot. But and then like a lemon peel, which you do the whole thing where you express it over the cocktail and then put it in. So that's what it looks like. Served in a nice little coupe glass, which I rarely use because these things break like super easy.
Is it good?
Actually, quite good. Very dry.
Yeah, it's like a lot of things I don't like in there.
See, I love gin, and I like sweet vermouth and a lot of things. I don't use dry vermouth in very much anything. So this is different for me. It's very much a dry cocktail, not like a dry martini, but in that vein, almost kind of like that though.
Yeah, I actually have a bottle of Benedictine, and I've used it for one cocktail, and like I spent all that money on a whole bottle of it, and I've never used it again.
Yeah, I looked at that and I said, that sounds expensive. And then I went to the liquor store. I'm like, yeah, that is very expensive. So yeah, not that. I won't be doing that again. So
it's not very good. So you didn't.
Yeah. Like I said, it's fine the way it is. It didn't need that extra thing. It's funny. I was reading a recipe, and the recipe is like, it says for one like heaping teaspoon. And because the heaping teaspoon just is the perfect thing. Just a regular teaspoon's too little. And I'm like, throw a fucking teaspoon in there. This is rocket science. Are you at a New York City fancy bar? Then yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I picked. So before we start the show to talk about Wild Wild Country, which is what we are going to discuss,
right.
How about we go to some news?
A bit of a trigger warning on this one. It's kind of gross. Lots of death and decomp. So if that's going to really fuck you up, just, go away for a few minutes. I don't know if you all are as into keeping up with cult news as I am. I mean, I hope you're at least a little bit into it, or this whole section of the show sucks for you. But I heard about this Soldiers of Christ cult in September. when 4 teenagers were arrested over a dead body in the trunk. And I went around trying to find out anything about this cult. Could not find anything. Even asked like my favorite group of cult nerds. Nobody knew anything about it. And we still don't really know anything about it other than Mihi Lee, the mother of these 4 children or teenagers who were arrested. Some of them were over 18, has now been arrested in conjunction with this dead body found in a trunk. So there's somebody who's been accusing them of holding this person against their will, and they were there when one of the guys went and opened the trunk, and there was a decomposing body in it. So, that's not something you want to see, especially if you're being held against your will by the same people. But,
Yeah.
the police got involved. This person had been like nearly starved, clearly beaten, and all we really know about her is that she left Korea to come to Georgia here in the U.S. to join a religious group, and they refer themselves as the Soldiers of Christ. So there's going to be murder trials. We're going to probably find out something about these people while this is all going on, unless they flee. So yeah, this is just one to keep on the radar. It's a weird one. It's a weird one. And like I said, I really want information because this is not out there. This is like hot off the press.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of these things. I didn't even hear about this murder. So, like, when you said, "Oh, and you shared it with me and our friend Greg here, and we were like, "What? Holy moly!" So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the details come out about this because I know so little about it. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. So.
Yeah. So, gosh, trigger warnings is going to be weird on this one.
Yeah.
Lots of racial and religious bigotry, abuse of the homeless, poverty shaming, religious control as always, something akin to child trafficking. I think it's close enough to child trafficking. If that's going to be like something that really fucks with you, like be aware.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Oh, there's financial control.
Financial control, food poisoning, which is like intentional in this case. And I don't know, if you've never had food poisoning, you might think who needs a content warning for that. But if you've had it, you're like, oh yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, you understand.
I remember the first time I really had food poisoning, like actual food poisoning and not just feeling nauseous. I was watching that Stephen King miniseries about the JFK assassination.
Oh, 11/22/63, or is that what it was?
And there's a scene where the guy has food poisoning, and I had to turn it off. And this is like a week later. So, for real.
Yeah, that'll stick with you.
So, yeah, intentional food poisoning, regular poisoning, lots of gun violence.
Also, people being drugged against their will.
Yeah. So, there's just a lot of fucked up shit. And also, if you have any like bad experiences with like meditation or yoga communities and stuff like that, this one might be tough because there's some really weird meditation stuff going on, and that's what it's based. Like the cult is based around. And just shitloads of misogyny, like so much misogyny.
Shitloads.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be fun.
That'd be fun.
And the color.
All right. So here we go. This show is on Netflix for those who want to watch it. It is a 6-part docuseries, and each episode is at least an hour long. So this is an investment of time, just a forewarning if you're looking to dig into it. So Renee and I had both seen this before, obviously, what started us talking, and this was my second rewatch. I think you said this was your third.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, fun. So what we're going to talk about here, basically, Wild Wild Country is about Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh, who is the head of a cult. Initially, wasn't really, just looked like gurus with a lot of followers at first, but we know how that works.
Yeah.
Starts out in India. Where did they start out? It was definitely wasn't in.
I didn't write that down.
I know they started in a bigger city, and they ended up moving to a smaller city in India called Pune, so they could have more space for more followers.
To hear them tell it, that's why they moved. And to hear
Yeah.
them tell it, they were being persecuted because they weren't the same as all the other guru type things in India.
Yep.
We'll get into that.
Yes, because the leader at that point was, and I'm going to say this as not as an insult, but as the female Gandhi leader that they had. Her last name was Gandhi, and I cannot remember her first name for the life
I
of me.
can't either because they called her Mrs. Gandhi in the
In a docuseries. So, yeah.
It was Gandhi's widow.
Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway, they, start gathering people, and people come, and it's, the typical story of the guru thing, and, how everybody comes and they feel so at peace, and the leader, their master, which, God, I hate when people call those leaders their masters. That really that sets it up in a whole different light.
That's not even what guru means. Like, guru just means teacher.
Yeah. And they are referring to him as their master.
Yeah.
Which, whatever, hey, if you're in some place and they're telling you I'm your master, get the fuck out of that, because that's not going to be something that's good for you, most likely.
Unless you're in a BDSM club and that's your thing, then have fun.
And you are consenting to it, then yes. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
But only if it's your thing. Don't do it if you're not into it.
Yeah, agreed. So, yeah, this is the background is the first episode is largely just sort of set up, and it doesn't mean there isn't some interesting things in it, but I don't think you and I agree we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, merely because it is a lot of backdrop. But part of this episode is where they do start thinking they need to expand out of India, and to tell them is because of persecution. Later on, we find out probably not the case. Maybe a little legal troubles, maybe a little run-ins with the law, need to get out a little quick, something. But the most interesting character of this whole thing is introduced in this episode, and it's early, and it's Sheila, who Ma Anand Sheila she becomes known as. So I'm going to let you take a bit on this, because this is the one that I think you really have a lot of opinions on, and so do I, but not as many as you.
I don't know where to start, because I realize, this being my third watch, I realize it's edited really poorly.
Oh, it is.
The timeline is so goofy. So it's hard to know where to start with Sheila, but I'm going to tell it, I guess, chronologically, because I think that gives you a better idea of why she is more sympathetic than she comes across for most of the documentary.
Yeah, I will. So I want to start by saying that she is 16 when she meets him. So
and she is given to him by her father as a gift.
Yep.
And is told that her purpose in life is to serve him and to be with him always at 16 years old.
Big burden for a 16-year-old.
Yeah. And so she's had no adult life where this has not been her reality. And she does, she goes to college in the US. She actually marries a person. Yeah, Zach, good idea.
Thank you, Zach.
But she gets married, and, she is still involved with the Bhagwan, but not consistently, constantly at his side. And then her husband dies rather suddenly when she's still very young. And of course, what better time than to manipulate her into being even more dedicated to him, even more by his side at all times. And what I catch on to, and it's funny because you have to kind of you have to hear what someone's saying and then step back and look at all the context. But there's so many times in this documentary where you hear that he either gives somebody an honor or a responsibility and then rips it away and gives it to Sheila to make her feel important, or the opposite, to humble her, to get her in line, whatever it is. And there's so many examples of this. And she's kind of a badass because she takes the PR, and really every time you're seeing these clips of her in the PR, especially because before you know how awful the Rajneeshees are, they're being, persecuted by these fucking rednecks, and she's out there
giving it right back to them.
Yeah, she's a badass, and she takes her responsibility to the Bhagwan really seriously. one of the things we hear her say is that it was very important to keep the law away from him. And even at the end of the documentary, we see her like now in her contemporary life. I don't think she ever really understood that that was literally her whole job the whole time. She was always going to be the one who took the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes so obvious by the end, which we'll get there. But like, I believe firmly that the Bhagwan knew that she would be reacted to with a lot of misogyny and a lot of judgment. And that was perfect for his purposes, because if he ever got in trouble, he could make her go down for it. And I think that's what happened to an extent. As we say all the time in this show, like, people are responsible for what they do even when they're in a cult. So she's responsible for the things she does in service to the Bhagwan. But I think there's a lot of things that she is blamed for that maybe she was the executor of, but she wasn't the person who wanted it or the person who was benefiting from it. And again, we'll get there. But and as we get there, like, I'll pop in with more opinions about this. But you know, you hear the townspeople say that she's worse than Hitler. Like, people from the U.S. General's office are saying she's pure evil. She didn't do it for money or success. She did it for evil. And in the courtroom, the only time the court reporter had ever felt this way before was when she was with the Ayatollah. And it's just like, the things that she did are not good, but they're not on level with like genocide.
No.
At all. Like, not even close. So
Yeah.
That's a taste. And, you know, when he finally turns on her, everything he says is so outrageously misogynist that it's like, but we'll get there.
Yeah. So, So before we get to where they go to America, and they do go to America because that's where the wild, wild country is, I want to talk a bit about their quote unquote meditation technique.
Yeah, because it's fucking wild.
Because it's fucking wild. Because it's not any kind of meditation I've ever heard of. I have the steps listed here.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Yeah, okay.
And I'm going to go through them.
Let's
I'm just going to go
on air. No, I'm kidding.
No, I'm not going to do them for real. No, we're not doing that. So the meditation is basically 4 steps, according to Bhagwan,
right?
Who later also gets known as Osho, which that's a little bit of a cultural appropriation there. But anyway, the first step is chaotic breathing, where you're told basically to breathe in and out really fast, almost like you're hyperventilating, like you just and just like. The quote is, breathing and hyperventilation is designed to arouse the serpent force in the Kundalini, whatever the Kundalini is, because it's not really explained.
In yoga, I think it's like sort of like the chi, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, they didn't explain it, and I didn't do any research, so bad host, Doug.
Well.
The stage 2 is where stuff starts getting, I mean, the first step's a little weird. The stage 2 is where it gets really interesting, because that's just basically, it's called explode. So basically you just let it all go. You scream and flail and do all kinds of fucking crazy shit. Just go nuts. Like, nuts is a relative term, and I apologize, I shouldn't use that, but you just kind of just
like it. So there's some neurophysiology involved in this, right? So like, when you do like really deep, slow breathing, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which will calm you and bring you like into what's known as your window of tolerance. So you're not overly excited, but you're not sedated, right? And so hyperventilation does the opposite. It sends you out of that window of tolerance, and it activates all these stress responses. So you might have gone into this meditation like you had maybe like a mediocre day. But by the time you're done with that chaotic breathing, you do feel like you have all kinds of stuff to scream and yell and flail about, because it's activating all of these stress responses. Your body is literally in fight or flight due to the breathing.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
So it's accomplishing what they want you to do for step 2. So maybe on that end, they're doing what they expect, but yeah, not like anything I've heard before. So yeah, you do your yelling and your screaming, and they didn't really specify time frame for any of this stuff. Really, it's just whatever.
As long as it takes, maybe.
Yeah, I guess. So the third step is they just mentioned it as HOO, HOO, and they said this basically you jump up and down, and every time your feet hit the floor, you go hoo hoo, like you're Mario from Super Mario Bros. Or something like that. And then the last one is silence, where you just get very quiet and you lay still. That sounds a little bit more like meditation to me, but it's almost like when somebody says, it's almost like when somebody's like, hey, if you're going to make ice cubes, how about you boil the water and then you go pour it in an ice cube tray and then you stuff it in the freezer and that'll give you nice, good ice cubes. It's like, just seems like the opposite approach to getting calm to me.
That does work though.
I'm sure it does. It's water. It's going to freeze.
No, boiling water freezes faster. I'll tell you off the show, but I had the weirdest experience with that in the Marine Corps. Anyway, I was
anyway.
But no, what I really think happens in this process, right? So they engage the sympathetic nervous system response, which makes you feel literally like you're under attack. And then they basically expect you to act primally, which would feel natural in that state. Then they're inducing like this joy, because all these things have like a physiological response, like they affect your brain. Chemicals are being released. And then they lay down and all of that relaxation hits at once. And there's a come down that feels really good because you've just like overdosed your brain with like cortisol and like endorphins and all this other stuff. And there's all this chaos. And then it's flat. It's to me, it's like when you hear about people, cult leaders who use psychedelics for meditation, because it affects the way your brain operates the same way that using drugs would, but they're just doing it without drugs.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it seemed like kind of a backwards way to get to it to me, but clearly a lot of people enjoyed it, like, because people thought it was great.
Yeah.
Including our, this is a person I thought felt sympathetic throughout the thing. You were less inclined to think that, but it was a lady named Jane, who was from Australia and was married young and kind of disillusioned and all that.
Right, that's Shanti B.
Yes, Shanti B.
Oh, okay, I do agree. I thought you were talking about the other lady with gray hair.
No, Shanti B is like, she's probably the most sympathetic figure in that to me.
No,
but
sorry, I thought I was thinking the wrong person.
Yeah, I didn't use her fancy Rajneesh name. I used her, plain, government issue name there.
Right.
So Jane, basically, she's a young mother, wife, is kind of bored with it, doesn't know what to do, and they kind of stumble into this. Somebody said, my favorite was somebody told her there was a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Yeah, psychologist.
And then this. And she winds up at a Rajneesh place. Like, that doesn't seem like a psychologist to me. That's like, if you're going to a meditation center, great. Like, that's fine. But like, it's
the sense that from the way she told the story, at least, that that he was like representing himself as a mental health professional.
Yeah, I wonder.
Which might have to do with some of the things we find out later about why they were politely asked to leave India.
Yeah, that might be the case because was the 70s. So things were wild back then. Not everybody was, there was a lot less like hindrances to be able to call yourself that back then, I imagine. So maybe that, but
Google it.
But she kind of falls all in with this. Loves the meditation. That was where she was kind of talking about how great that felt and how she felt alive and all that stuff. Yeah, but there's a bunch of characters who are instrumental to this doc that are in the first episode. So, but they're basically like introduced, like Niran. I think it's Swami Prem Niran is his name.
The attorney.
The attorney. He's the attorney for all of them. He's introduced in this, and we'll find out from him. He's still in, like or at least very wistful about the experience that he had and not able to experience it anymore.
I mean, I think he's still in, and I got to tell you, this is the weirdest thing, but I met somebody at a Halloween party last year that I thought was cool, and we started following. I think I told you about this. We started following each other on Instagram, and I found out that she's a follower of Osho. She's like my age. This all like happened around like when I was born. So this is still happening.
Does she wear the same shirt that you're wearing now?
At another Halloween party, she was in costume. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, if you follow her on social media, I just wonder if you saw that she was maybe wearing those clothes, because that would be funny.
No, so the only clue I had was when she actually posted a picture of him on his birthday, and it was somebody else's birthday, so I can't remember. Oh, the West Memphis 3 guy, Damien.
Oh, yeah. There's Justin Jones. I can't remember Damien.
I'm sorry. I should have looked this up because I feel like an ass for not remembering his name. But he has the same birthday as the Osho, and she was saying basically that these were two of her most influential people on her spiritual path. And if you don't know anything about the West Memphis 3 guy, he does a lot of magic ritual stuff. So sure. But anyway, yeah. You can find if you go to Barnes and Noble, you can find journals that have quotes from him on it, and people just kind of pretend this didn't happen.
Well, one of those things where it's out of sight, out of mind. I think that happened in the 80s. So right, clearly that's 40 fucking years ago. Sucks.
You see a bunch of nice quotes and you don't have context. You're like, oh, this is some kind of philosopher guy.
Yeah, he sounds like somebody he says things that sound very profound. So let's not. But considering where how his organization was, maybe we shouldn't use those. But one thing I did want to point about the attorney Niran, I'm just going to refer, because I'm not doing Swami Prem Niran and all that stuff. He said this thing, and it said, was he an aware boomer? Because he said, I grew up in the best possible time in the 40s after the war, middle-class families finally breaking through. And if you didn't have money, you could go to education. So I went to law school. He was aware that he grew up in the best possible time to do that stuff. You don't hear that shit from boomers.
There's a lot to like about him. And
he's a very likable guy.
But towards the end, I start to just get tired of him because he was so brainwashed that his interpretation of events that he was present for are there's no way that that's how that happened, bud. There's no way that that's what those people told you. That's never happened in the history of the world.
Never. Yeah, I'm trying to get through some of this because I have a million notes, unfortunately. So I'm trying to figure out where we're going next here.
Well, so let's say there's a woman named Lakshmi who is sent from India to find a place to buy land. And she's going around, she's reporting back, she's not finding anything that fits the instruction she's been given. And this is the first time that Bhagwan really plays with Sheila's importance, I guess, or at least the first time in the documentary, where he just sort of unceremoniously fires Lakshmi and tells Sheila it's her job now. And Sheila went to college in the US and was fascinated with the US because she felt like gender equality existed there and, religious freedom and all that. She's very taken with the Constitution and the rights afforded. So she went to the US to find land, and she did. And it was 80,000 acres, something insane. 80,000 acres, is that right?
Yeah, it was 80,000 acres, 60,000 of which were rocks, according to the one farm.
Yeah, they did say we went to farm the land and it wasn't exactly farmable. They must have got a good deal on it for that. But yeah, so then at some point.
Yeah, but it was Sheila who found that. It wasn't Lakshmi. So Lakshmi was trying locally, and then Sheila had this idea to go to the United States.
Yeah, because we didn't actually find out that Lakshmi knew that she wasn't responsible for finding a place anymore, right? We just know that Sheila was told Lakshmi is not doing the job.
Yeah, we don't know if Lakshmi was sent out and just was continuing to look in India. We don't know. She could have been doing that the whole time.
But also, the other thing I forgot to mention is when she is pulled back in her grief at being widowed extremely young, the Bhagwan gives her an irrevocable power of attorney. And I think that sounds oh, he's got so much trust in her. But I actually think it's extremely manipulative.
For sure.
Because it's she's basically been sold to him as a child bride. But she's not treated as a wife. She's not treated even with affection, really. She's fascinated with him. She's taken with him. She's given this, oh, he trusts me so much. But
yeah,
he's a secretary, literally.
Well, and a henchman at points too.
Right.
Yeah. So she find out. Oh, and before we jump, because we're going to jump into the U.S., where this is where the crux of the whole story is. I mean, it's that's the main part of all this. But I wanted to note that in this place in Pune, in India, they were showing video of it, and it is overwhelmingly white people there in the middle of India, and I'm like,
yeah,
just scads of white people in the middle of India, and I'm like,
well,
I get it was the 70s, but like.
What I love about it is that there's all these white people there to seek the authentic experience.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we know that like a lot of those so-called gurus were scammers anyway. Like they just knew they could make money doing like pretending to know something. but especially in this case, they're going to go for their authentic Indian experience. But they admit openly in the documentary that they were not considered authentic Indian spiritualists. The government of India didn't like them and thought they were bullshit. So it's kind of ironic, I guess, maybe cosmically.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of racist, right? It's like, well, this guy's Indian and he's wearing the thing and he's got a beard. So like, obviously this is the authentic Indian experience.
Well, we branched into the Kamare thing that we talked about. Whereas if you kind of look the part, you can kind of get people to follow you. Like,
right. And but at least in Kamare's thing, he wasn't actually like an Indian native, right? He was Indian by descent, like, ethnically, yeah. But in this one, it's kind of funny because it's like, well, I'm in India and this guy's Indian, and I'm just like a white person who heard about yoga last week. And so he's got all the answers. And they didn't like ask around and find out that everybody thought he was awful. Do your research before you join a cult, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they didn't have the internet back then, so maybe it was a little harder.
Like, don't just follow the first guy with a beard you meet in India. You know,
maybe
there's a lot of guys with beards in India. You should ask around, like talk to people. God dang it. That's the same thing Doug said before the show. That was not the idea.
Renee is very cheery tonight. So, yes. I'm wearing a Cat Thulu shirt. So, I'm in the holiday we just passed spirit yet because it's not Christmas time for me.
I mean, I was wearing Halloween clothes all day today. I don't give up until like middle of.
That's your holiday, Renee. That's why I was like, I said Christmas Day. You're like, oh, shit.
Change my color.
Yeah.
On air right now. No.
Yeah, right now. Do it. All right. So, do we want to just jump into them getting to America? Because there's other things.
Well, so
not a lot of stuff, but
two things I want to mention before we jump into that. The way Sheila speaks about Bhagwan is very weird, right? She says in the first episode, he was porcelain. Like he's fragile, he's breakable, but he's also the master and he's an intellectual giant. And so, and again, this comes back into me thinking that there was a lot of manipulation there. That she was trained to take care of him and almost infantilize him. And I do think that there's an element, and we saw this in Kamari as well, where people tend to like excuse childish behavior from gurus. And some of the stuff that we get into with Bhagwan is like, spiritual enlightenment did not make you think it was okay to be a greedy bastard. Like, that's not how it works. And then the other thing is that they did not tell the people on the ashram that they were leaving. They snuck him out. They saw the plane leave and they were like, what?
Yeah, where's well, the ashram, they put him in a car and like he stole away. Like they didn't tell him, hey, we're leaving. Apparently the ashram kind of was still there, wasn't it? Was that really
a lot about people just being like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't wasn't Jane, the Shanti B. She was saying that she was just like kind of there with her kid, like
with her kids and her husband. Her husband was there too. So
yeah, just like what now? Yeah. So it's weird. That was a very weird move. And what we find out later about how things wrap up in Oregon, it kind of comes full circle and you understand, like, oh, because he was fleeing.
Yeah.
He wasn't just moving to a new location. He was fleeing.
Yeah. Well, one small thing, it's not small, but it's when you were talking about how Sheila got power of attorney, that came on the heels of Sheila's husband's death, in which Bhagwan commanded someone to drug her so she was unconscious
Oh
for
my
3
God, yeah, I
days.
can't believe I forgot that. They put her in a medically induced coma.
Yeah, for 3 days.
That's not okay.
What?
Um, yeah, maybe someday we'll find a documentary on the incels and we can talk about how Jordan Peterson did that to himself twice on purpose. But you don't do that to somebody because they're sad. It's normal to be sad when your husband dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered, outside of like the loss of a child, like the number one traumatic event that any adult can go through.
Is the loss of your spouse or partner. Yeah. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, Jill almost had that, so thankfully she did not. But
Yeah, well, I don't think she would have ended up taking care of a weird old man with an affinity for Rolls Royces, though.
I would like to think not. But yeah, we know each other pretty well. But hey, who knows?
Who knows?
All right, so now that took us a lot longer than I wanted to get. We're to episode 2 here.
Jeez, yeah.
So we're gonna have to move it along a little bit because we have 5 more episodes. All right, so they're in Oregon. They pick up this ranch, 80,000 acre ranch. It is a lot of this thing talks about how they moved into Antelope. They were 20 miles outside of Antelope.
Yeah.
And Antelope is this tiny town of, they said, about 50 people. And 50 retired old crotchety Christian white people.
And they
That
definitely like, it's so funny because there's like a point like way late in the documentary when the guy's like, and that's when it started to be a problem. And it's like, you made it clear it was a problem the moment they arrived, and you never stopped having a problem with them. It was like if they said hello to somebody, they'd be like, you could just tell that they looked down at us. And you're like, could you? They complained.
I think that's the opposite.
Yeah, they complained that all of the Rajneeshees were happy. It's like, oh God, I'm sorry. Is that challenging for you that other people are happy?
Apparently so. Apparently being happy is a bad thing.
So I guess this is where we just get into like unrepentant bigotry. So they fucking hate the Rajneeshees 100% from the jump. They behave as though these people came in with like Uzis and kicked them out of their homes and wouldn't let them back in. When in reality, like Doug said, they live 20 miles away from town. And they talk about like the Bill Bowerman, the inventor of Nike, was their like
his dad was the inventor.
Well, no, his dad was Bill Bowerman also, and he had the ranch next
yeah.
door to the Rajneeshi Ranch. But again, remember, the Rajneeshi Ranch was 80,000 acres next door. You can't see it.
Yeah.
They were so far away from anybody, and everyone's like, "Oh, they're ruining our town." They're, like it was so weird. I couldn't like. This is the thing is we've already kind of given it away if you haven't watched it that we do find out they're not good people. But the townspeople didn't know that. And most of the things that they do that are bad are in direct reaction to worse things that the townspeople did to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really nuts to watch it unfold because, again, nobody has the gift of hindsight in this documentary. Like the townspeople don't regret it. They don't see the connection between their actions and what happened. They're like, see, I told you they were evil. And it's like, well, I mean, that they did that after you were like putting guns in their faces and telling them that you're going to blow their heads off. That's pretty, like, people react to that. People get upset.
Yeah, like one of the bumper stickers later on is better off dead than red or something like that because the Rajneeshis wore red and orange. And as Sheila said at one point, all those people drive trucks and they all have fucking guns in the back of their truck.
Oh, and yeah, so I said like that's when it all got bad. But in this like first few minutes of this episode, you've got people saying they ruined the town. It was the downfall of civilization. They're so dramatic. Like they are so over the top in how much they hate these people. that it's like it's hard to watch. And like for the time, I guess there is a little bit of context here is that like Jonestown Massacre had recently happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so people just had like that fear. But here's the thing that's funny about that. Jim Jones was a Christian. The People's Temple was a Christian church. It didn't have shit to do with fuck, like when it came to Rajneeshees. And at this point in time, they didn't know about the weird meditation. They didn't know anything other than that they were from out of town and they dressed funny.
Mm-hmm. And their leader was brown.
Right.
So there's that. What I want to comment here is so they decided this ranch to build their own city. Bhagwan's vision was to make a city of 50,000 Rajneeshees, which is the people who follow him. So I will say, however he had all this money to build this fucking town, it was slave labor. It wasn't great because, right. But they built an entire they built plumbing. They were like on the forefront of doing like solar, and they fucking dredged the fucking ranch to make it farmable. Like they did a shit ton of impressive things.
In like, there's this fine line, right, between like communal living and slave labor. And in terms of the people who are not the heavy players in this, they seem to be leading, like they were taken care of. They had medical care. They had individual homes to live in. Like, so it was communal. It didn't, I mean, they didn't have 17 Rolls Royces like the Osho did. But it like, I don't know, when we talked about the Sarah Lawrence thing, he's just working these people to the brink of death. It seemed like they were working hard and long, but they were actually like, there was a communist sense of like people were getting stuff back. They were not starving. They were not like, they weren't sleeping in tents outside while Bhagwan slept in a palace, you know, like, so it's like on that weird fine line, because like I say, in the beginning, they were just a bunch of hippies that wanted to live on a big ranch.
To get away from the quote unquote rat race. There's a lot of it for them. Niren specifically, he was like on the fast track of being a lawyer and was just burning himself out because he was working so many hours. And
yeah,
you know, I think you're right. You see all these people and they were doing work, and they mentioned that sometimes they work 16-hour days.
Right.
So that's not great. But the thing is, they were doing it. It seemed like there was, and again, this is the perspective of the docuseries. Was that the actual case? It seemed like they all were in this thing of, we're going to work really hard now, but this is going to be something that we can all enjoy once we get this to where we need it to be.
Right.
So that seemed to be the sense that I got from how they perceived it.
It did seem like, you know, there were people who had very high stress positions and who were definitely being abused, but like the majority of the Rajneeshees just seemed to be living there and having what passes for a normal life when you live on a commune.
You know, sex anywhere you want.
Right. Well, I'm not saying it was normal. I'm saying it for them.
Normal for that, yes.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, right? Is we have this issue where the locals have already decided that they're awful and evil because anything that isn't Jesus is evil. And then there's ads in magazines about the Rajneeshees and about free sex. And you know what they didn't really get into on this documentary was, were those recruitment ads or were those taken out as like against them?
I don't know. We were kind of just passed over that because
right. And then there's
a
documentary that shows the meditation technique, which often in this primal stage leads to sex. And we see, I mean, I don't even know if you can call it sex. There is some weird stuff happening in that documentary. Like there's one scene in this, like the guy is like in almost like is it the child's pose in yoga where you're like this, your head down on the floor? And there's a woman like spread eagled around him, and she's basically like humping his head, like convulsing and screaming. it's that kind of sex that's happening in the meditation. You can't really blame a bunch of like elderly conservative Christians for being like, what the fuck? Because I'm not either of those things. And I was like, what the fuck? You know? So that, like, it's being fed is what I'm trying to get at, is like they were just off doing their own thing, but then there were these pieces of media that were getting to the townspeople where it's like, oh, well, you probably, like, ideally, you didn't want the townspeople to know all that about what you were doing up there.
Yeah. And they didn't truly know. And several of the people said it's the unknown we're afraid of. Like several of the fucking townspeople said that. They just didn't know. And that's what scared them, was because they didn't know.
It's like, it's none of your business, but whatever. But I could like, I guess I should say what I said before we started. Nobody like no group of people in this, not the government, not the townspeople, not the Rajneeshees, none of them are sympathetic. They're all fucking terrible.
All of them.
But the first experience of terrible we get are the townspeople, and they are terrible.
Mm-hmm.
They had no, like I said, that thing about like pointing a gun at somebody and saying, I'm going to blow your head off. Like that really happened more than once. And they would shoot weapons off when the Rajneeshees were around, just like to terrorize them. And then they'd be like, they would harass us by existing.
Yeah, they're not good. I mean, there's a few quotes in here that I thought were interesting from them that I wanted to talk about. One was the mayor, who was Margaret Hill. She's a piece of work. She said this, and I'm going to read you the note I wrote because it's, should a group of people be allowed to enter an area and literally wipe out the culture that is there? And I wrote, shakes head and Native American.
Yes, I swear. Some of the shit that they say is like, are you fucking? Because there's another part where they're like, well, should any religious group be able to dictate the laws? And I'm like, this is so funny because in my notes I put like, somebody needs to call the state of Utah. And then immediately after that, the documentary is like, in Utah?
And Salt Lake City, and then they mentioned Boston because of the Catholicism way back. And like, yeah.
Be a fucking atheist and run for president, man. See what happens. Like, it's so wild. Like, I'm sorry, but like, even right now, supposedly in the progressive future, we have religious extremists taking over our national government. And those people are fine with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. One other comment was, there's a difference between being smart and having common sense. And that is shit that gets said in rural areas all the fucking time, because they want to shit on people who are educated because they think they have common sense, which makes them smarter.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think the Rajneeshees had common sense, but I also don't think the townspeople did.
That was Bowerman. That was Bowerman who said that. That was him. Yeah.
And he is like, this is the thing, is he's like this down home rancher who's just trying.
Yeah, and he always got
his dad invented Nike.
Not a down home rancher. He's fucking rich.
Yeah, it's your father, like, which with a waffle iron, which is, I don't know why we needed a history of Nike in the documentary, but it was interesting.
Yeah, because Bowerman was like, hey, why don't you talk about my dad so he'd show you how impressive he was. So it shows how impressive I am. And I think that was part of it.
Interesting on the part of the documentarians, because they definitely did want you to see how awful the townspeople were. They did not hold back on that. Mm-hmm. And I think, if I'm guessing, that was on purpose too, where they're like, okay, let's talk about your dad, you down home, simple man. Let's talk about your billionaire father. Like,
yeah, there was. Well, this is where we get into, basically, this is like where the Rajneeshees are kind of talking about the townspeople and their rhetoric towards them. And then like, well, Niren said something like how they were like talking about them as a cult and saying stuff like rule oriented and one leader. And he goes, that applies to the army more than it applies to us. And I was like, that's a great fucking quote.
That's true. Okay. I mean, I was in the Marine Corps. I can tell you the bite model applies. Like, one thing I do, this blew me away the first time I watched it, and it never stops blowing me away. Leo Ryan is the they say this in the documentary, but he is the congressman who went to Jonestown, who was murdered, and that kicked off the Jonestown massacre. His daughter was a Rajneeshi and moved to the commune, and they actually interviewed her, not the documentarians, but like the media at the time.
Yeah.
And they were like, "What do you think your dad would say?" It's like, I think my dad would see this totally different. I don't think he'd agree that it's totally different.
No.
There was no mass suicide, and at least at that point in time, there was no militia either.
Yeah.
But I think most people who like had any contact with the People's Temple would have been like, yeah, just don't move to a different country or out in the middle of nowhere with a religious leader who is weird. Just don't do that.
Yeah.
Because Jim Jones, when he started out, was a pretty you'd like want to know more about the People's Temple when they started out before they moved. And so it's like Rajneeshi was already telling people to jump up and down and literally fuck like wild beasts. That was already happening. There was no like, we're going to change the world with positivity before we got to the weird stuff.
Yeah. And one of the things that did not help things for the Rajneeshees was there was a movie that was made called Ashram, which was basically this expose, quote unquote, about what happened at the ashram, and it was a hit piece. Like, it was really poorly cut, and basically that's where you were talking about the weird lady doing thing with the spread eagle. There's another person like where this lady was laying on the floor and he was like laying like not perpendicular. What's the opposite?
Parallel?
Perpendicular. Yeah. But he was like laying on top of her, and he wasn't having sex with her. He was just flopping around on top of her. Like, it just looked like, and then later they're sitting and they're quiet and they're all naked. Like, the whole thing's taking place when they're naked. And of course, the super uber conservative townspeople are like, there's a lot of evil shit going on up there.
Well, and this is the thing too, is you have to remember that at that time, and this still exists, but it's like much quieter. But at that time, yoga was considered satanic. You can thank fucking Aleister Crowley for that. But anyway, sorry, I threw up in my mouth a little bit when I said his name. You can thank him for that, but also just anything that they felt was spiritual or religious in nature that wasn't Christian was satanic. And so like yoga in and of itself was considered yoga, astrology, like all these things that we think of as pretty like innocuous.
Mm-hmm.
That was evil. And so then you have this like thing that kind of looks like that, but is way over the top. And there's literal, if you saw like, okay, if you just saw that clip out of context of anything and you didn't know why they were doing it or what the purpose was or anything, you'd be like, that's fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and that again, that's in 2023 where we have like a whole different idea about what's appropriate and what isn't. And they're seeing this already with the sense that these people are evil because they aren't Christian. So I'm not excusing them because they're still like redneck bigots who hated anybody who wasn't just like them. But I'm saying like that feeds this bigotry in a way that is really like, I don't think it can be overstated.
Yeah. Well, backtracking a bit when you're talking about Bowerman and Bowerman's dad and creating Nike, but that Bowerman's dad was kind of the guy who really started getting in the ear of politicians to try to stop this Rajneeshpuram, which was the town they named it. And I think they got incorporated so that they were officially a town.
So that was confusing to me because I think that, so remember, most of the legal stuff we hear is from
Mirans,
and he is, you start to see where he loses grip on how the law actually works toward the end because he's so invested in the Bhagwan. I don't know. They didn't say, we got incorporated. They said we became a city so that we could issue our own permits and do this and do that. And he says, well, the Constitution says that you can. Well, yeah, like I can build a house, but I still need permits. Like
Mhm.
you can't just do it. There's a process to go through it. I don't think they went through the process, which is how it became, as we see later, they weren't even living on the ranch. They moved into Antelope because they couldn't use the buildings.
Well, I
mean, it was a power.
I
Well, there's like layers to this, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was that. If it was that, I think they were moving into Antelope. Yeah, there was something about that because there was a fight with that, where basically Bowerman, like his kid was saying, well, we wanted to keep Oregon, so to speak. So basically white and Christian, and that was the whole
Make
point of
Oregon
that.
great again.
Yeah, make America great again, all that sort of shit. So what was it? I think what happened there, if I remember right, is this pressure from Bowerman Sr. Basically winds up where there's going to be a court case based on land use.
Right. They got him
which it's like a stupid technicality. Like if you buy the land, as long as you're not doing anything illegal, who the fuck cares what you do with that land? They said that land, like 80% of it was unfarmable. And they turned it into a farm.
Yeah, they improved the land. Like this is the other thing too that's really funny is like, I don't know if this was the case in the 80s, but in most places, if you can still kind of homestead, it's weird, right? But like if you can prove that you improved an abandoned space, you get to keep it even if you didn't pay for it. And that's like a real thing that happens now. They paid for it and then improved it. It's like, and again, they're 20 miles away from the town. Just like, who gives it? You don't like them? Let them stay 20 miles away. They don't need to come and open their own cafe in your town if they can have it in their own town. Which again, this is funny because they got like really wrapped around the axle about them buying the cafe. And it's like, you can't buy something that isn't for sale.
Well, how I understood them getting into Antelope was this, is because there was pressure and the city council, whatever, of Antelope was like, or Wasco County or whatever, where they were trying to rescind their status as a city. So which makes me think they did get incorporated so that they had the city status.
I just thought it was okay. Sorry.
Yeah. But then they decide to start moving in Antelope so they can have residents in Antelope to take over the board.
Well, but so here's the thing is that this land use thing was the goal of it was to destroy the structures that the Rajneeshees had built. And while they were in this battle, they weren't supposed to be using the buildings. I happen to believe that the legal ability to use the buildings wasn't exactly why they moved out and moved into Antelope. But also who gives a shit? Because if the people of Antelope would just shut the fuck up, they would not have moved into Antelope. And then that becomes the other thing. They buy everything they can. And the Rajneeshees say these properties were for sale for years and they came in and paid above market value. But to hear the townspeople say it's like, well, they took advantage of these people on fixed incomes and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, dude, like they wanted to sell the property and somebody wanted to buy it for more than it was worth. That's on you to make it a desirable thing for them to do. They would have stayed on the ranch if you had just shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they do that. They buy a bunch of houses. Obviously, the people in Antelope are getting pissy. And the one guy who's currently the mayor, like Silversmith, I think is his last name. He kind of is a bit funny in some capacities, but at the same time, he's still part of the Antelope crew. Really happy to see them go.
Is that the one in the overalls the whole time?
Yeah, yes, that guy.
He's a fucking goober.
Yeah, he is a goober, but anyway, he was talking about how they would come and like, even if a house wasn't for sale, they might say to someone, hey, would you like to sell your house? We will give you this amount of money.
I don't think that's true, though.
I don't think so either. I think that was fabricated.
When I moved here the first time, it was a place kind of like that. I mean, more people. I think, like there was like a few thousand people, but there were properties that had been for sale forever. They were on sale for years before I moved here, and they were still on sale when I moved away.
Mm-hmm.
That was a reality. That's what happens in small towns that don't have businesses and like an economy. And guess what? A town full of retired people doesn't have. It doesn't have a fucking economy. So I think that in this particular case, the Rajneeshees were telling the truth. I think it is highly unlikely that they were, when they're talking about people saying I won't sell to them, I think they meant, yes, my house is for sale, but I won't sell to them. But legally, that's not how selling your house works.
Yeah.
So yeah, people make offers now. So this is the other thing, right? Is like this town I live in has become hip, and so people make offers on houses that aren't for sale. But I'm going to tell you a secret: none of the people who don't want to sell answer those phone calls or letters because their house isn't for sale. Like that, it's just, I don't find it believable at all that these people like sold without wanting to sell. And if they did, it was because they were like, oh, here's a great financial opportunity for me. I win.
Yeah. And then I get away from all the stuff that makes me uncomfortable on top of it. So
right. And maybe they didn't like their neighbors either, because I'm telling you, there's no way that before the Rajneeshees came in and united them toward a joined hatred, that they didn't all hate each other. There's no way.
And having grown up in a small town, that whole, we were all just this tight-knit community, that is a crock of horse shit. There is so much fucking bickering in small towns because everybody fucking knows each other. I know because I grew up in one, and I vowed I would never live in a little town like that again because it was just not my speed. Now, ironically, all of my family lives there. None of them left.
To be fair, this is why I'll never, like, I would never live on base also, but it's because there's nothing else to do.
Mm-hmm.
Gossiping and being in each other's shit is all there is to do.
And drinking, lots of drinking.
Which leads to more
gossiping and problems.
So yeah, no, I find like there's people who hated that hard before the new group came in. They just
absolutely
dispersed it amongst each other.
Yeah. And if you went to that town today, it would be filled with Trump flags.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I also have a note here that apparently the reason, remember we said they were moving into Antelope was trying to rescind their incorporated status.
Yes.
So that was but that fails because the Rajneeshees get enough people in the town. They have enough votes. Their incorporation stands. So apparently they were incorporated. Because Antelope tried to override it, but yeah.
But then they fucked, the townspeople fucked around, and for a while, Antelope became Rajneesh.
Yep, they changed the town name to Rajneesh, which
changed all the businesses. Which again, you can't change a business if it's not for sale. You can't pass a law that says that they have to change the business name and only serve vegan yogurt or whatever they were selling. My favorite part of this, and it was happening in Antelope, and then also when they got back to Rajneeshpuram, was the pink police.
the peace force.
I love the pink police. I think that all the police should have to wear pink, like that Marilyn Manson video, which is what it reminded me of. But anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, all the stuff keeps escalating everything. And what we didn't talk about, there's a hotel in Portland, Oregon, that the Rajneeshees had.
Before we hit that, I want to hit a couple other things.
Okay.
Because this is about like Sheila's involvement in this is before they even move into Antelope, the people are saying they want to tear down Rajneeshpuram. They want the whole ranch just demolished. And obviously they just spent all this time and money building them. This is their home. They're not happy about it. But Sheila says, I will paint their bulldozers with my blood. And I'm like, badass. I'm sorry, but this is why I like her, even though she's kind of a terrible person. Because in that moment, she was right and she was being a badass. But yeah, and then the other thing is they say as Sheila says, they were only using the land use bullshit because that was a way to challenge their religious rights. That was their loophole, which I think is really important to note, because when the Rajneeshees try to use loopholes, they are evil. And when the townspeople use loopholes, they are right.
Mm-hmm.
So
that doesn't sound at all like things that go on now.
not at all.
So as I was getting to, but those points we needed to hear. In Portland, the Rajneeshees have a hotel. So basically, that I feel like that's sort of like a way station when Rajneeshees come in before they go to Rajneeshpuram. That doesn't seem like it's explicitly spelled out, but that's kind of what I inferred.
Yeah, and they own it. We know that they own it. And so I think I know where you're going. So I want to also hit what's happening in Antelope at the time. Vigilantes were going around wearing necklaces made of bullets to show them that they were willing to shoot. As I mentioned, they were shooting off rounds just around them. Mm-hmm. There was big, mad nationalism, which is really funny, because how do you put American flags up everywhere if they weren't already there? So now all of a sudden, we're nationalists, now that we are united against this threat, right? But we weren't before. Wanted dead or alive posters of the Bhagwan. So again, like pretty clear what's going on. They someone says it wasn't that they were asking to be shot; they were downright begging for it.
Yeah, I wrote that quote down too.
Yeah, and so we get to the hotel is vandalized before the big thing, but then when the Rajneesh, their retaliation for being shot at and threatened with death all the time is to shine lights in people's windows at night. And they act as though the Rajneesh were literally like stealing their children away and drowning them in a ditch.
Yep.
They said they were vindictive. It's like you were shooting at them.
Yeah, or at least, very least, threatening them to be shot.
No, if I'm like, maybe I'm oversensitive, but if you shoot a bullet in my general direction, you might as well be shooting at me. I don't really fucking care that you aimed at 10 feet to my right. The message is clear. So.
Yeah. Fucking yokels. I will say that. I will say that a few times this show. Fucking yokels.
We're the ones who have to make sure that evil doesn't win this battle, was another quote from one of the fucking rednecks.
Yep. Just the amount of like anonymous rednecks in this video. Like, it feels like they interviewed every townsperson. Like, there was supposed to be only 50 people there, and we see all these anonymous fucking yokels.
And again, they're nearly 40 years ago. More than 40 years ago. So, you know, some of those people died, right?
Most of them have died at this point.
Yeah, like, so, but I think it's really interesting that it's like, at this point, the worst thing that the Rajneeshees have done, that's like, actually, they're doing something against another person, not just existing, is shine lights in their windows. That's the extent of their evil at this point in the story. And these people only got lights shown in their windows after they started shooting guns. Like, it's just so weird. Like, I can't wrap my brain around it. And I don't like, I mean, I guess I'm glad I can't, because that would say something about me if I understood their line of thinking. But it's really over the top. Like,
yeah. So big thing at the hotel now. Because this is where things start escalating, because this is where violence really happens.
Yeah.
There is a bombing at the Rajneesh Hotel in Portland. It was set off in a particular room. No fatalities. There were people injured, but apparently nothing life-threatening.
I'm going to assume that wasn't the point, though.
No, the point was to show them that they knew where their hotel was.
No, I mean, I think that they intended to kill people. You don't set off a bomb, or more than one bomb. You don't set off multiple bombs in a hotel in the middle of the night that you know is occupied if you're not okay with people dying.
Yep. Agreed.
So yeah, and that just like gets like a few minutes, and then we move on, and all the horrible things that the Rajneeshees do gets all. It's very fucking weird because I think at the end of the day, you can definitely call what the Rajneeshees did terrorism, like from the point of view of like inflicting fear and threat of violence to in pursuit of a sociological or religious goal. They were committing terrorism. They were not bombing people. The worst act of terrorism in the entire documentary is these fucking rednecks bombing their hotel. It just baffles me. Like it.
Yeah, and they never make it clear if they find who did it. I don't think they did. So, but this gets Sheila's back up. This is where Sheila starts getting actually militant, I think.
And would it not like wouldn't you feel threatened at that point? Like,
yeah, she said she wanted to protect her people, so she told them to go buy weapons.
I mean, like, I'm gonna say this, and like, I don't know. I kind of have a sense of who our like viewership is, and maybe this is gonna rankle some people. I own guns. And I own guns because I live in the middle of nowhere, and that's it. That's the whole reason I live in the middle of nowhere. That's it. They live in the middle of nowhere and are being bombed. Like,
yeah,
and everybody in the fucking town had a gun too.
Yep. Yeah. Here, as I said, with Sheila getting her back up, she makes the comment, "I don't believe in turning the other cheek." Like,
yeah,
this, just like it's like you said, there's some badassery to her, but like maybe she goes a bit too far.
And she also said the Bhagwan says, "Don't turn the other cheek, take both of their cheeks," which I think is. I don't like him at all. I don't find him sympathetic at all, but that is kind of badass too. I'll hand it to him. He says some cool quotable things. That's not one you'll find on a journal at Barnes and Noble, though.
No, you will not see that in an Osho quote either.
My favorite part of the documentary is where the townspeople say they're going to unincorporate because that'll make the Rajneeshees that live in town want to leave. I have no concept of how that idea made sense to them. I live in an unincorporated town, and part of the draw is that you can do whatever the fuck you want because we're unincorporated. So why would unincorporating it make the Rajneeshees not want to stay and continue doing whatever the fuck they want?
You got me.
That was like the weirdest. I was like, what? Like, what? How does that make sense? But then also, they just assumed that the Rajneeshees that lived there wouldn't vote.
They didn't anticipate that. They didn't anticipate them being like, "Oh, well, we have the right to vote." So
yeah, but why? Like, it's like this tunnel vision. There's a difference between being smart and having common sense, to quote one of their own.
Yeah. There's a couple of quotes here after this because now that they're shooting weapons and they're training the sannyasins, which sannyasins are like the real Rajneeshees, I guess, like the devoted ones, I guess.
Wait, would you be a sannyasa and not live on the compound also? So they were talking about like they had sannyasas just kind of all over the country that they didn't really explain how, but they were followers of Bhagwan.
Yeah, I don't know how you became. It sounds very much like a Thetan level 10 thing.
Well, they did because they did say like all of this attention made it so that they could sell tons of books.
Mm-hmm.
So like it did nothing. Like all of this sound and fury from the locals did nothing but make them a bigger threat to the locals and more famous, literally internationally.
Yeah, because we should say that Bhagwan and their part of the thing, they had a printing facility on Rajneeshpuram so that they could publish books. And he published a bunch of books, bunches of them, and sold a bunch of them. And that was part of their main income.
Yeah, and at some point they have communes internationally, like
all over the place.
So I do love that when they or on the city council, they made a local park a designated nude sunbathing area. That's just kind of the level of petty that I think is appropriate in the situation.
Knowing that would just infuriate the old crotchety white people.
Right.
And the thing was, most of the people that were doing nude sunbathing were just white people that were like, it wasn't a lot of people who were white people there. So, which we mentioned earlier.
There was probably like 2 Indian people for every 20 white people on Rajneesh.
That's generous. I think it was 2 Indian people for like every several hundred. That's how it looked to me, but I could be totally wrong. But a couple of comments after all this shit shakes down. One of the residents said there was a lot of people who would have loved to have shot Sheila. I'd like to have choked her to death a few times myself. He said this on camera. He said this on camera.
Here's the thing, right? So they're saying shit like this, often to the Rajneeshees' faces. And then the Rajneeshees are harassing them by being police officers. And it's like, okay, so like, are you telling me that if you ran the police department wouldn't be keeping an eye on the Rajneeshees? Are you really going to claim that and expect me to believe it?
Mm-hmm.
I also liked that when the old man was picketing day and night and was arrested, they went on and on about how it was so wrong to call this little old man a menace. And it's like, can you say that out loud slower? Do you mind looking in the mirror when you say it? Like, these people didn't even live in your town when you started calling them evil. Like, and the one guy, this is another part I wrote down because it was just like, he puts the context in it. The thing that should tell him he's wrong is in the statement. That woman is the closest thing to Hitler I have ever seen, and I have seen people coming out of Buchenwald. I have seen them coming out of Dachau. The only thing she doesn't have are the ovens.
Yeah, he said it with a grin on his face too. I remember that.
That.
Yeah.
Like, you were there, supposedly, if I believe you. So you know goddamn well that that's not what's going on here.
Yeah. They're not the biggest villains in the town though, because the biggest villains in this town, this Antelope Town, for me, are Rosemary McGreer and her husband Kelly.
Yes,
they are shitheads, both of them, giant racist shitheads, and I don't know how else to say it. What?
Proud of it.
Very proud of it. Very proud of it. Very proud of it. Rosemary, Kelly was a little bit more soft spoken, but Rosemary was just an asshole.
Yeah. And when she did speak, her opinion was made known. I just really, there's not a single local that I like at all. The only one that seemed relatively harmless was the biggest fucking dork that's ever graced my screen. And also he wasn't like, he took like so much glee in being shitty.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't okay. So I got to talk about this because it was like, what the fuck? He manages to find all of this shit, all this paperwork that was supposed to be shredded, where it does show that the Rajneeshees are doing illegal things. But how does he find it? Because he's dumping his own stuff and he sees posters and things from the Rajneeshees that he thinks would be cool to have. Mm-hmm. So he's just digging through the dump for things he thinks are cool, like keepsakes, and stumbles upon actual evidence. He's not the hero. He's a fucking dork. He was like, I'm going to put up a poster of the Bhagwan in my fucking bathroom or whatever. Or maybe I'll use the target. I don't know. It was like, and he's just giggling like, and it's like, it's not, you're fucking white. You're like a little leprechaun. It's so weird. A redneck leprechaun. Sorry, Irish people.
No, that's okay. And you're right. He is a giant dork. So we've established that the town people are shitheads. Let's just leave that at that, because we could go on the entire rest of the show on that, because holy shit.
Because they have their festival.
Yes.
And we see footage of the festival and everyone's having a great time. There's beer gardens. They're riding in hot air balloons. They're whitewater rafting somehow. I don't even know.
Yeah,
Like,
one of the people had like their leg, but I don't know if you noticed, one of the people had like their leg hanging out the front of the whitewater rafting. Like, yeah, man. I'm like, are you an idiot?
now I don't know because they didn't say anything about like a river. But anyway, everyone's having a fucking blast. And one of them were like, they're running a concentration camp up there. They're literally like in a hot air balloon having the time of their life.
That sounds so much like every concentration camp I've ever heard of.
I'm just like, who? I don't even know. I don't like go talk to the Buchenwald guy, except he agrees with you somehow. Like what?
I don't know. Like I said, they're scared of anything that they don't know, which they've said.
So this is where the Bhagwan tells Sheila to get into the media and be provocative, and she does a damn good job of being provocative.
And she's very good at it.
Oh yeah.
She gets on Merv Griffin, which, hey, I'm old. Merv Griffin was a big fucking deal then. That was not a small thing.
But Donahue was also a huge deal at that time.
Yeah, she was on both.
I mean, it sounded also in that clip from Donahue that it wasn't the first time she had been on Donahue.
I don't think so. She's probably on multiple times.
She's on fucking Crossfire. Yeah, which I think is still a show.
Yeah, it is. Well, I don't know if it's still on. It was on for a long time.
I haven't had visual news on for like a decade because it drives me insane. But yeah.
Yeah, but Sheila did go on like this sort of media rampage and just like she takes no prisoners. Like she's very adamant about their right to do everything.
Yeah.
Especially when the government starts trying to insinuate that they should have a separation of church and state. And I was like, hey, motherfuckers, you're trying to do that. You've been trying to do that for the last 100 years to make it this a Christian country.
But
get the fuck out of here with that.
The fucking bullshit about the school that they were wearing red the teachers were wearing red because they were Rajneeshi, and they're like, well, can a teacher wear religious garb in school? And it's like, yes, literally, yes. That is nothing.
Have you ever been to a Catholic school? Yes.
Well, they're saying in a public school, but even still, you cannot tell somebody they can't wear a cross. You can't. It's not legal. And that is why over time it has become legal and accepted to wear like a turban if that's your religious belief, or to wear, whatever it may be that your religious belief is, because it started from Christians being like, well, you can't tell me to take it off. And then these same motherfuckers are like, well, can they wear red when they teach? And it's like, yeah, like my favorite part was when they had a local talking shit about the Rajneeshees, but she was wearing the same color.
That was fucking great.
Like, is she allowed to teach? Like,
no, you can't teach. Get the fuck out of here. So this leads to this is the Attorney General actually that's bringing this case based on the stupid. Yeah. So basically, they want to try to have the city declared null and void because of the Establishment Clause, which that just is like. That made me so fucking angry. Of all the things, I think that made me the angriest because I have real issues with people using the Establishment Clause, who are the very same people who are trying to make sure you can't have any LGBTQ references in school, or you cannot have any, you have to put the 10 Commandments in the classroom. Get the fuck out of here. That shit drives me bonkers. Even that happened 40 years ago. That still makes me mad.
I don't know, but wait till we get to the end, right? Like, I think we're both going to just explode. Like, we're going to short circuit the internet when we get to the end, to the conclusion. I think you know what I'm talking about, but if not, like, it'll hit you real fast. Also, what they said about the pink police in Antelope versus Rajneeshpuram was, well, the cops weren't loyal to the badge, but the Bhagwan. And I'm like, ask a Christian if they're more loyal to the police department or Jesus. Ask any Christian cop.
And you know what
they're
they'll tell you.
Obligated by their religion to say Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it's different because Jesus is real. Well, Bhagwan's literally real. Like, you can touch him. So, anyway.
Yeah.
It makes
So
it sound like I like this guy and I don't. It's one of those things.
no,
Like,
no.
yeah, it's just they're so bad that you're kind of like, I don't know, is it so wrong that they ended up giving everybody salmonella on purpose? Like,
Yeah, we haven't even got there yet. That's the
I
thing is
know.
we're running so far behind, and we got to
Oh
push
my
it up
god,
here a little bit.
yeah, this could be like a
Yeah.
4-hour episode.
All right. All right. So let me push a little bit here. So now we're getting into the legality stuff because the AG does this thing to try to push for the establishment clause. State legislatures start getting involved because now they're pushing a variety of things. One was apparently called the initiative petition.
This has to do with the 1,000 Friends of Oregon or something.
Yes, that was part of the Bowerman thing and all that. So, but it was the stated goal of that petition was to expel the Rajneeshees from Oregon. That was the only stated goal in that petition.
Yeah.
So, like, their goal is to push a group of people out of the state. That is not shit you do in a quote unquote free country at all.
And who are the fascists again?
Yeah. It's clearly those people in the red. There's a task force created to address the Rajneesh problem, which I think is a fucking.
I mean, they make a good point. It's like when have you ever heard a group of people and problem together as a phrase, and that has not been a horrifying thing?
Yeah.
Never. It's never happened. It didn't happen here either.
Exactly. So, we should also state, I don't think we stated that when at one point when I think Sheila got the power of attorney, Bhagwan went silent. He didn't speak publicly.
Yes. Well, I think
forgot
he got the power of attorney, but
it was after that.
Yeah.
So she was basically the public face. And then,
purpose, because who was there for the nightly meetings she had with Bhagwan? Absolutely nobody but her and the Bhagwan.
Nope,
there was
just her.
Nobody there that could say he did say that or he didn't say that. It was just her and him, which is how the people who side with Bhagwan justify thinking that she made everything up. But he was literally the leader. And she was
very clearly devoted to him too. It wasn't like, yeah. All right. So again, sorry, I'm speeding up through some shit that is just more legal stuff.
Right. There's a shitload of legal stuff, but then there's going to be another election. And around that same time, the Rajneeshees start a program to house homeless people. Now, I'm going to say this is like maybe controversial. I think that their story and the townspeople's story are both right. I think that it was actually intended to be like a positive charitable work that would also benefit them.
Oh, absolutely.
In the beginning, I think they really thought, like, we're going to bring these people here, we're going to give them a home, it's going to be great, and like, we're going to recruit them, which to an extent, like, these people were very loyal to them because they got a house and they got fed every night and they got 2 beers a night, which I found really funny. And and then it was like,
that's not funny later, but yes.
No, but it was, yeah, we'll get there. And then they're like, we want you to vote on our side. And they're like, fuck yeah, we're going to vote on your side because look at everything you've done for us. Because they got medical care, they got dental care, they got help with things that you just don't get help with when you're homeless. You could die of an infected tooth when you're homeless. You could die from literally like cutting your leg. So giving wound care to these people was like, that was more than anybody else was going to do for them. And they got homes. They got actual houses to live in. So I don't think they would have gone to that much trouble if it was just to get the vote. But I think they believe they would. And then where they went wrong was not preparing for the eventuality that they would get pushback on them.
Oh, they also weren't prepared for the eventuality that homelessness comes with a host of things you have to account for.
Yes, but
go ahead. Sorry.
I think that they were maybe exaggerating that a little bit. I'm going to say, not to say that there's not a fair amount of mental illness associated with homelessness, but it is striking to me that the mental illness did not become a problem until after they were denied the right to vote.
True.
If that were the cause of the problem, then it would have been a problem the moment they started moving people in, and it wasn't.
And the
So,
reason they removed for that too is like I agree with you. I think it was like they were trying to do a good thing, but also garner votes, which to me felt very missionary adjacent.
right, Christians do that shit all the time. Like, let's not.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
So it felt a bit of that, but what they were trying to do, the Bhagwan apparently told Sheila that he wanted to take over Wasco County so that they couldn't rescind the city incorporation or cause any problems.
right.
So they were trying to overwhelm the vote. And as you mentioned, they registered a whole shit ton of people to vote. And as long as apparently in Oregon, if you're over 18 and you're a resident in Oregon for 20 days,
You can vote.
you can vote. That was not illegal. They were not doing anything illegal. They were following the law.
And yet,
They take a group of 30 people to vote, and the county clerk says, nope, I believe these are fraudulent. So I am denying all new voters. What does that sound like? That sounds a lot like shit that's happening now, doesn't it?
here's the thing, though, is that this is where I think that Sheila lacks some common sense. We see the video, they purposefully got these people riled up to be on their side, to value their right to vote, for it to be important to them. And they did not have any response ready for that being challenged. And that is kind of bonkers to me, given all of the different ways in which people have not been acting within the spirit or even the letter of the law towards them up to this point. So it's like if I like I'm somebody, my right to vote, I look at it, through a historical lens. People had to fight and literally die for me to be able to vote. So I'm gonna fucking vote. And anybody who tries to get my way, get fucked. I don't care. And she wasn't prepared for anyone to get in the way, which meant she wasn't prepared for the reaction of a bunch of people who were pumped up about their right to vote and be heard, being told they were not going to be able to vote, and they were not going to be able to be heard. So they get back to Rajneeshpuram, and these people are fucking pissed.
As they should be.
Right, which exactly, I would be fucking pissed too, but there's not like 1,000 of me. So,
thankfully, right?
Right.
Sorry, Renee.
That every day. But yeah, so they fucking riot basically. And then you do have the issue where now in this elevated state where everybody's angry, and the Rajneeshees apparently, so this is the other thing I didn't like. Even the Rajneeshees referred to the homeless as them. They were still kind of segregated. And that's part of the problem too. Because it seemed like the Rajneeshees were just going to go about their normal shit without even giving a crap that these people that they brought in, who they rallied to be on their side, are now fucking pissed. And so they had to go find Sheila when the riot broke out and there was violence occurring. It's like, why wasn't Sheila speaking to them? Why wasn't she saying, we're going to take this to court, or I'm fucking angry too, what are we going to do about it? Or, something. Like, she was not behaving as a leader. They just kind of were like, oh, well, bye. So this guy is being violent. They come get Sheila. He chokes her out. And they drug him. They sedate him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they decide, wouldn't it be great if we just sedated all of the homeless people that live here? Which again, anymore. This really bothered me. The Rajneeshees and the townspeople kept referring to them as homeless and as street people.
Street people was the one I heard all the time, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, they're neither homeless nor street people. They live there. You gave them a home. What the fuck is going on here? It was so gross. But that aside, so I have this in my notes because it's really fucking weird, all right? What they gave them was Haldol, which is not a sedative. It's an antipsychotic used to treat schizophrenia. Now, a lot of antipsychotics have a sedating effect. It's So it worked as a sedative. But why the fuck did they have that much Haldol?
No idea. And it was without their consent too. We've been make that clear.
Right. So they drugged the beer that they were giving them. It was like, well, now you can have as much beer as you want because they had drugged it with Haldol, which again, super fucking dangerous because how do you know how much people are getting? How do you know it's suspended properly? Like they could have killed people. They didn't, which is great. I'm glad they didn't, but it's like, you can't just pour a bunch of antipsychotic into beer and hope that everybody gets a dose that's just enough to calm them down.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. But yeah, they have this pharmacy, they have these medical facilities. It's not outside the realm of like reason that they should have medications. But why did they have enough Haldol to drug that many people?
Yeah, because
That bothers me.
yeah, the estimation was they had bust in like between 3,500 and 6,000 homeless folks, and that's a lot of people to sedate.
Yeah,
a lot.
And again,
And
to even say that it's not a sedative. It is a specific drug for a specific thing that happens to sedate you. How many schizophrenics were they planning on having on Rajneeshpuram to have like buckets of Haldol sitting around?
Buckets of Haldol.
Well, I mean, because how much fucking Haldol does it take to sedate 3,500 people on the conservative side?
Did you know that was my high school band name was Buckets of Haldol?
Mine was Generation 1 antipsychotic. But yeah, or first generation, whatever. But yeah, that was very troubling. And of course, maybe a little bit of foreshadowing, but like it was just they showed it, and because I'm taking classes right now on that, on like different drugs and how they work, and I'm like, wait a minute, because the first 2 times I saw it, I didn't know what Haldol was.
Me either. I didn't.
I was like, I think that is an antipsychotic, and then I googled it, and I was right. And I was like, that's fucking weird. That's really weird. That's not something you should have laying around.
Yeah, it is. I didn't know what Haldol was either. I figured, I just assumed it was a sedative. I didn't realize it was an antipsychotic.
When I saw it before, that was the same thing, but like I recognized it from class, and I was like, what? That's sort of like, I don't know, like it's a ranch, right? So if they were like, well, they give them a bunch of ketamine, you'd be like, all right, well, they have horses. But Haldol isn't for horses. It's for schizophrenic human beings.
Yeah. And definitely don't take horse drugs if you have COVID. But anyway.
Well, ketamine isn't going to be, it might be fun. I don't know. I've never tried it before. There's got to be a reason people do it.
I'm not going to get into that because I know some people who, would definitely have done that.
Taking ketamine for COVID or just taking ketamine?
No, taking whatever that was for COVID, that horse drug. Ivermectin. So, so
less fun.
But this kind of puts a little bit of a powder keg under Rajneeshpuram because there's a lot going on. So
the next thing they do is they're like, well, these guys are a problem, and we're not really getting anything out of having them here anymore. So we're just going to dump them around Portland.
Yeah, we should say that the guy that choked Sheila out, they just dropped him off at the outside of the ranch. They didn't even take him to Portland. They just put him on a bench.
Park bench in Antelope.
Yeah.
And then from there, they kind of just went through, and you're leaving, and they were like escorted by security to pack their shit and just dropped off somewhere. So now we get to the point where we're like, all right, well, the Rajneeshees suck too. They're bad too. Right. Okay. Well, I've been really rooting for them the last 2.5 episodes, and now I feel like an asshole.
Yeah. and honestly, it was something where I watched the second time. I was like, fuck, I forgot they did that. Right. Like I had messaged you. I was like, I forgot they drugged the homeless people. I'm like, holy shit.
I remember.
How did I forget that?
I remembered that they drugged the homeless people. I had forgotten that they just dumped them, which is really bad too. Like, I think the first time I watched it, the dumping them didn't seem that bad because they had drugged them, which is really bad. But then it's like, wait, no, it just gets worse. And I do believe that they started out with at least somewhat good intention with this program. But I really feel that there were a lot of times that Sheila went in just trying to get done what the Bhagwan wanted done and didn't foresee the possible problems, did not prepare for them, did not take them into consideration when making a plan, which is also why I think it's hilarious that she's presented as some kind of criminal mastermind by both the Bhagwan and the feds. It's like, this is a woman who brought maybe 6,000 homeless people, but at least 3,500 homeless people, built them homes, moved them in, and did not consider that there might be a problem if they didn't get what they wanted. Did not consider that there might be people with mental illness. Like,
Yeah, that was my big thought.
Mastermind. She just, yeah.
So obviously now we're in some weird territory now because they're dropping off homeless. We have as you alluded to earlier, there is a rash of people in the town of the Dalles, which is in Wasco County, who start getting vomiting and diarrhea, like going to the hospital. But initially thought it was food poisoning. It was later determined that it was salmonella.
Well, salmonella is food poisoning, but it's just really, really, really bad.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the health authorities just blame it on the food handlers.
Well, so this is interesting because it comes across to me that it was never actually proven that it was the Rajneeshees. The health authorities did their investigation and they discovered that food workers in these different restaurants where the food outbreak was all lived in the same house. And so they're like, okay, so like that explains it. And then the accusations came from the townspeople, and then later the Bhagwan. Sheila admitted to a lot of shit that she did openly in the documentary. She did not admit to that.
No.
And so I'm like, did they actually do that? Now, later we find out there was a conspiracy to poison a larger number of people in order to affect the vote. But this is coming from the same guy who seemingly fully believes that they put beavers in blenders to poison the water supply.
Now, he did say, I don't know if that's true.
He said, yeah, but he tells the story as though it is true. He's like, well, I don't have evidence of that. And it's like, that's an outrageous thing to believe. First of all, they went and got beavers and they were going to put them into the water reservoirs because beavers produce bacteria. Okay, but people drink water that beavers have lived in all the fucking time. That's a bad plan. And then it was like, well, they couldn't get through the fence to put the beavers in. So they
also, have you ever picked up a beaver? No, you have not.
Yes.
They're not things you just pick the fuck up because they will fight you.
They can take a tree down with their mouth. Okay.
And they have claws. They have big ass claws.
But anyway, they couldn't get the beavers through the fence, and instead of using like bolt cutters or something, they took the beavers.
They could have just chucked them over the fence.
Oh, yeah, they could throw them. So they take these wild animals they're apparently holding in their hands back, kill them, put them in blenders, blend them up. Which I don't know what kind of fucking blender in the 80s could fucking go through bone, but apparently one existed. Blend them up and then take the blended beaver and get it into the water supply. Now, here's my question, Doug. How did they get themselves and the blended beavers through the fucking fence? They couldn't get themselves and a whole beaver through the fence. Like, the human is the bigger thing here. Here's
my theory. They had those pool noodles and they just stuck it in their mouth and blew it.
They siphoned blended beaver. Also, he said blended beaver with a straight face. That's a thing a person at a high level in the government said with a straight face before he was like, no, I don't have any evidence of that. But that's what I was told.
Yeah. Sorry.
And beavers.
The pool noodle thing, just, I don't know where that came from. That was the dumbest thing I think I've ever said.
No,
anyway.
You're dealing with the dumbest thing you've ever heard. You can't even go somewhere intellectual with it, Doug.
Fair point.
So I'm saying, like, when they're like, we think that they did it and we think this is how they did it, it's like you also think that it's possible the beaver story is true.
They were willing to believe anything to try to get them out of there. I really do. So
it was like the townspeople would say something crazy and they're like, yeah, that's probably it. And then like after Sheila left, the fucking Rajneeshees would say something crazy, like, yeah, that's probably true too. And it's just like, this is what fucking happens when you decide that this random woman is the most evil human being to walk the face of the earth without doing the investigation first. You believe the weirdest crap. Even if they were like participating in animal sacrifice, which they were not. But even if they were, I still wouldn't believe the fucking beaver blender story.
No, the blended beaver thing just they didn't have ninja blenders back then, so I don't find that a plausible idea.
But also, if they blended beaver and poured the beaver into the fucking water supply, then wouldn't people have gotten sick from rotten beaver guts?
You would think.
It's like trying to prove a murder with no body. It's like they didn't fucking blend beavers. Shut up. And also,
okay,
he kicked my dog.
Yeah. So now there's also some shaking up going on in the Rajneesh area, right? So we're getting now into where this new group of people come into the commune who are dubbed the Hollywood crowd, and with good reason.
Because literally, well, here's what I love is that they introduced. Was her name Halsey? No, Halsey.
Hasia.
Hasia. Halsey is
not Halsey. Halsey's an actual artist, and she's great.
Hasia, they introduce her in the documentary as the wife of the producer of The Godfather, but then they show like media footage from the time. She is the producer of The Godfather in the media footage. I thought that was amazing because that was like whoever was in charge of PR for the Rajneeshees were like, just say she. Nobody knows what a producer even does. Nobody knows. It's fine.
Yeah,
she's the one.
And she also marries inside the Rajneeshees later, which so we don't. So was like that was her ex-husband. Like we don't know. We don't get any clarification on that. But anyway,
no, I think they did say it was her ex-husband in the beginning when they first introduced her. I think so. But she marries the Bhagwan's doctor. This is so we're gonna get back to like the treating gurus as children, right? The other lady with the bob gray hair, not Shanti B, the other one,
Sunny.
She's like, so the Hollywood crowd comes in and they're showing Bhagwan fancy jewelry and fancy watches, and they bought him a $1 million diamond watch, and these are things that Sheila would have never shown him because she would have known he would want them. It's like, what?
Well,
also, he owned like a fucking million Rolls Royces. Like that was not an issue. His whole thing was that you could be spiritual and still want to have a lot of shit. Like stuff was cool.
Yeah, he said that they were supposed to be meditative capitalists or something like that. So yeah.
So I didn't get the thing with them. Like they showed him jewelry. It's like he first of all knew what jewelry was. People wore it on Rajneesh Puram, but like, what? I didn't like that. And then they compared him to a blackbird. It's like, first of all, it's crows that collect shiny things, not blackbirds. But second of all, like, this is your fucking spiritual leader, and you think he's like a kid
shiny
and a lollipop? Like, what? Here's your clue that this is not the right place for you. So they get like pretty much complete access to him.
Yes, because of the gifts.
To give a new corporation for Hasia and John to run. I don't know who John is.
John was kind of her partner, and then
he just kind of
but then Hasia married the doctor. So listen, there was a lot of free love going on in that compound. So maybe that's just what it was. Like maybe Bhagwan apparently had. Bhagwan had ordered a lot of marriages, so maybe that was one of them. Who knows?
To justify the immigration fraud thing, they were like, well, the Bhagwan didn't even believe in marriage. And it's like, you don't have to go there. Like, people who believe in marriage have green card marriages too. Because, like, from the beginning, they said that they believed in marriage. They just believed that all marriages should be open.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so they they get like money. They get to run a corporation. I don't even know what that means in this context. A corporation for them to run, like there's some kind of pyramid scheme going on here too. I don't know. And then Bhagwan went doomsday. And that's when someone came to Sheila and said that the Hasya was giving him laughing gas and Valium. Which again, that's not because he was childlike and spiritually whatever. Like Valium is a fucking benzo. It's not like they were like they gave him ayahuasca so you could have a spiritual experience. No, they gave him Valium and fucking nitrous oxide. So she confronts him and he tells her to stay out of it. And then this is where you start getting this thing that people inside are like, well, Sheila was power hungry and Sheila was this and Sheila was that. And again, I firmly believe that is due to Bhagwan's manipulation of everybody.
Yeah, but a little bit of that is Sheila does have a little bit of need for power too, a little bit.
I don't, but in this particular case, you've got your leader who is now high on drugs all the time, is giving like this group of people giving him drugs, whatever they want, and is talking about doomsday scenarios. Sheila, maybe she wasn't jealous, but that's not why she was acting on this. That's really intensely scary.
Mm-hmm.
And she's supposed to be the one who protects Bhagwan, and she's supposed to be the one who cares for Bhagwan. And he's acting, he's acting like a drug addict. He's a drug addict. He is going crazy. A doomsday scenario on a ranch full of people with guns is pretty bad. It's not something you want to have happen.
Yeah, it's reminiscent of our Waco thing where like he was basically like things are going to go bad, then we need to be prepared. And so yeah.
So yeah, somehow in all of this, he tried to change his visa, and immigration said that he's not a religious leader. And then they won that case, whatever. Moving on. Marriage conspiracy, whatever. And then they wanted to kill, was it Weaver?
Yeah, I believe Turner is that Charles Turner is a primary because Sheila starts building a list of enemies of the Rajneeshees. This was according to Jane, who was what the hell was her name?
Shanti B.
Shanti B. Shanti B says that. So
yes, but she also says that when Sheila made the claim that the Bhagwan was on drugs and was considering suicide, Sheila played the tapes for her.
Yeah. Oh, and that's because Sheila was recording everything.
This is another thing. So I'm positive that Bhagwan did not know his house was bugged. I don't believe for a second he didn't know everybody else's houses were bugged. No fucking way. Never in a million years. And the whole doomsday thing and needing tunnels out and all of that was Bhagwan's thing. He was going doomsday. So all that shit that Sheila had in the basement was with a fucking hot tub in it. Like they made it sound like it was so like cryptic. It had a hot tub. It was to house the Bhagwan if anything happened. And
Sheila said that, by the way.
Yes, and they're like, she was building underground tunnels for reasons we don't understand. And it's like, yeah, because the fucking Bhagwan told her to. She met with him every night. He knew what was going on. She probably played tapes for him, just not his own. There's like the amount of, and this is the other thing, is like I kind of wonder if the people living there truly didn't know that their homes were bugged. Because there's this there's this thing that happens when the Bhagwan turns on her that everyone's like, yeah, that's what happened. And it's like, okay, but like the way they were talking about the bugging system and the underground tunnels and all this stuff that everyone was so surprised by, how do you pull that off without anybody noticing? That's like, Sheila was not a construction worker. She wasn't digging out tunnels.
She wasn't Andy Dufresne getting out of Shawshank.
Right. She didn't install that hot tub. And it sounds like the bugs were hardwired. So I feel like it's very possible that they were somehow convinced that it was in their best interest to be bugged. And further evidence for that, in my opinion, is when the lawyer, turns all the tapes over at the end, believing that it's just going to fuck Sheila and everybody else is going to be fine. And I think the only reason he would think that is because he's kind of a silly guy.
Yeah, that's fair.
And he knew that he hadn't fucking conspired to murder anybody, so obviously nobody else had. Here are all the tapes. He's a very silly guy.
Very silly.
I don't. He's kind of sympathetic. I kind of like him right up till the end where he starts.
He's kind of a dope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned Charles Turner. So let's get into this bit because now we're going to talk about Shanty B / Jane, where so basically when they begin this list of enemies, Turner's at the top.
Right.
So Sheila points to Jane / Shanty B. You're a good shot. That's for you. Jane says, absolutely. Like, yes, that's me. So she gets sent to Portland and gets met with a disguised sannyasin. Disguised because they're not wearing orange or red.
Right.
Because that's a disguise, apparently.
In this case, it's like I wore blue.
Yeah. So they take her to a safe house. She gets told to get handguns because they're easier to transport. Jane gets driven to where Turner worked with this handgun that she acquired. And they're waiting for Turner to come out of the office. And he never comes out of the office. So at that point, they're discussing maybe shooting him in the parking garage. Like, she has a moment where she's like, "This is a bit nuts. Why am I doing this?" But
I think she thought it was nuts mostly because she felt like it was pretty certain they were going to get caught because the plan was very public. Not because she didn't want to kill, like that she was like, I can't kill somebody. Which I'm saying speaks to like the level of mental control that was present, because later we find out like some other things about her that, whatever. But I also love the idea of trying to assassinate somebody with a handgun.
Yeah, what an assassin. Now listen, if you're an assassin, and I'm not an assassin, but I've read a lot of books where I talk about assassins, and if you're gonna shoot somebody, you're either gonna snipe them or you're gonna shoot them with a 22. So
no, don't shoot him with a 22 either. But that's what
but what I always read is like if you shoot him in the head with a 22, the bullet just rattles around their brain and scrambles them so they're dead.
I mean, maybe I wouldn't.
Maybe is that true? That might be one of those fucking dumb things that you read in fucking books.
Don't have any stopping power, so you'd have to get like the most perfect fucking shot. Like anyway, but what I'm going to say is that with a handgun, you have to like be really close to a person to shoot them. With a rifle, you can actually like, okay, call me crazy. When I think of an assassination, I think of like, JFK, like you're far away and you shoot and nobody knows where the bullet came from and everybody's like, oh, I don't think of like walking up to somebody 10 feet away and being like, bang, bang. Like, no, you're going to probably also get shot. Like, I don't know. Like it
sounds like a mafia style thing, right?
Yeah, but in public, the mafia wouldn't even do it in public. This is what I'm saying is like, if Sheila is a criminal mastermind, what the fuck was that plan?
Not a good one.
Right? It's like she's very good with PR. She's not that great at planning crimes, actually. Like, she's pretty bad at it.
It's a weird thing. So I wanted to talk a bit about this too. With there's an investigative journalist that gets brought in here now. We'll just touch on him briefly. Les Zeitz. I can't pronounce it. But he gets sent to India to kind of dig up all the shit in Rajneesh to try to figure out what the fuck happened there. Right. He comes up with, he says 35K of pages of materials of the origins. Apparently they fled India ahead of getting arrested by Indian authorities.
For a lot of the same crimes they're being accused of in the U.S.
Yep, same thing. Immigration fraud, tax issues, money smuggling, which I thought was like weird. But they would smuggle money from other countries into India. And I'm like, okay. Well,
it's like, people trade currency. Like if the dollar is stronger than whatever, then they'll, I don't know. You can make money that way somehow. I don't really understand how.
Yeah. All right. So we talked about the tapping, and you mentioned about how they played the the taping of Bhagwan talking about basically picking a day to end his life.
Right. Also, they could not get the numbers for the next election. They failed at that. That's important.
That's true. That's true. We forgot that bit. Yeah.
And then Sheila starts calling them Hitler, which I thought was a fun twist. They've been calling
Like,
her Hitler. She's like, no, they're Hitler.
listen, Hitler should be reserved for genocide. Let's
Hitler
just.
should be reserved for Hitler. Like, let's just keep it there.
Yeah,
Like,
he's a one of one. There is nobody like him, and hopefully there will never be another one like him. Let's.
yeah. So and then they try to set fire to the planning off. I mean, they do set fire to it, but they don't really succeed in destroying anything. Again,
Yeah.
criminal mastermind, Sheila.
What a mastermind, man! I'm going to go to Switzerland and hire her to do my next heist.
Oh, also, arson was one of the things that they did in India too. Which, okay,
Imagine that.
that was so weird. So Bhagwan wants to kill himself. She has a recording of him making a plan with his doctor on how to do it painlessly, and she and Shanti B decide they should kill his doctor to prevent this from happening. They give Shanti hypodermic full of whatever. Yeah, a syringe. And she stabs him in the butt, and it doesn't work. He doesn't die, but also neither does the Bhagwan. Shanti at that point is like, what the fuck happened to my life?
What did I do?
And also at the same time, Sheila is like, how did my life get like this? I need to fuck out of here. So she and Shanti B and
Pooja,
the pharmacist, go, we're getting the fuck out of here. And they do. My opinion of this is I believe Shanti's reasoning for leaving. And she was very close to Sheila. And so, like, by the transitive property, I believe that Sheila left because she was like, this is all too much. And when you see the interviews of her when they're like hiding out in Germany, she looks like 20 years older. And it's been like 3 or 4 years. This is like really was genuinely running her ragged. She genuinely did not like, she wasn't having a good time. This idea that she was benefiting from all of this shit. Like, if you look at her, she almost looks older in the tapes from Germany than she does as a modern day elderly woman in some ways. Like, her skin is gray. It's really wild. So I kind of believe that it was like, I don't think she was fleeing because she thought she was going to get in trouble. I don't think she thought that the Bhagwan was going to do that to her, because as happened when he decides to finally speak publicly, he accuses her of all these crimes. He puts like every bad thing that's happened on Sheila, and then consequently they start investigating the whole cult, and he gets charged with a bunch of shit too, because it turns out he's not innocent. And I think that's probably why she didn't think he would do that, but apparently there's someone who's less of a criminal mastermind than Sheila. So yeah, and he like does a press conference where he says like they're coming after her, and they do, and it's wild. So
it is wild. It is wild.
Then she goes on TV and does her thing that she always does, which is, it was fucking cool. And then he's like, she's crazy. She's on drugs. She's mad I never wanted to have sex with her.
Yep.
Like every misogynist thing you can think of, down to the quote, she did not prove to be a woman. She proved to be a perfect bitch. I believe he knew, because she talked to him every night. He knew that the misogyny pointed at her was massive, like over the top big. And I think that he knew if he got in and pointed it at her himself, people would fucking buy into it. That's what I believe. And like I said, I believe it was always the intention that if someone was going to go down for the crimes of the Rajneeshees, it was going to be Sheila.
Yep. And they pointed it all at her as much as they could, right?
Yeah. And what I thought was really interesting, well, I guess we'll get there because I don't want to jump ahead. So anyway, Hassia takes over Sheila's job, and they do like a ritual burning of all of her stuff, saying that she wanted to be a high priestess. She wanted to be a pope. She wanted to whatever. And they burn her shit. and what?
Well, they also burn. Isn't this something they also burn like all the
Rajneeshees stuff.
all the Rajneeshi tenets, all the Rajneesheeism. They basically said Rajneesheeism is dead.
Because Bhagwan said, I didn't start a religion, Sheila did. Which again is like, so what did you think you were doing when you were talking to these people? It's super like, what? They put it all on her, like everything on her. And then, but weirdly, all of the Rajneeshis go along with it. They don't say, well, I'm here because I believed those things. They go, yeah, oh, she looks crazy. And then they just get really excited because they're allowed to wear different colors now.
Yeah, and they do the whole, well, there's a sense of relief now that Sheila's gone. Okay, of course. But because of Sheila's leaving, also, the Bhagwan breaks his silence, which interestingly, the government said that was his big mistake.
Yes, because you can't.
Because he starts basically opening the doors for them to go search everything.
Right, and then they make what's his name? The lawyer. They make him the mayor.
Yeah, Niran.
They make him which is so funny. So like, I'd like to introduce you to our only candidate. Like he handpicks the fucking mayor, and then he's like, I got a great idea. I'm giving them everything. And this is why I start to be like, oh, honey. Like he was so convinced that it really was Sheila. He was so convinced that Bhagwan would have never done anything, and nobody else, only the people that left with Sheila. It was her and those bitches. And it's like, to the end, he was outraged that they didn't only focus on Sheila. To the end, he said, our lawyers said that they had never seen a case with less evidence, but he should settle anyway. And I'm like, that's not a fucking thing. That's
no,
not.
If they don't have that much evidence in a high profile case, they're not going to press charges.
And also, if they fucking bothered to, their lawyers would be like, fuck yeah, we're winning this. We're winning the highest profile case we have ever been on. High five to us. Let's go to court. They would not say, you got to settle. And this guy believed it, and he was there. He was there when they had this conversation. And in his head, it was like, oh, it was all Sheila. They said it was all Sheila. There's nothing. There's nothing. It's like, you gave it to them. They have everything.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not the lawyer anymore. You didn't get discovery. You don't actually know what's on the tapes that you gave them.
He didn't listen to him, clearly.
I think there was maybe if Bhagwan knew that was happening, he maybe had like the naive belief that they would see how much there was and not bother with it, which again is goofy. But
it's stupid. They have resources, you don't.
Right.
So Sheila and her group of 21, 25 people flee.
Yeah.
So they flee to Germany. I was like, okay. I'm not sure why Germany. And they flee to some island off the coast of Germany. It wasn't like in Germany proper, which is
I think I don't know why Germany specifically, but they couldn't be extradited from Germany because a big thing about getting her was that if she crossed into Sweden, they would get her. Was it Sweden?
Yeah, and they were worried about Switzerland because Switzerland has a non-extradition treaty, which I think is kind of why she's there now. But
oh no, she went to prison. This is the other thing is why I'm like, something's off in how Sheila is presented, because she had the opportunity to cut a deal. And she said, no, I take responsibility for what I did and I should be punished for it. I'm going to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in the face of Bhagwan being like, she did everything. She's a heinous bitch. She deserves to be fed to the dogs like the Jezebel she is. I put those words in his mouth, but that was definitely the time.
No, but it was a Jezebel thing, because let me tell you, being married to a woman who was raised a evangelical Christian, talking about all that shit that was said to her when she was a kid, I heard the Jezebel thing a million times. And yeah, whether it's coded or not, I know what it is.
But yeah, and so I thought that was really interesting. She was just like, I did it. This is the other thing I think is crazy, is because the feds still had this idea of her as she's the most evil person that ever walked the face of the earth. And she's like, I did it. I deserve punishment. And they're like, she had no empathy. And it's like, she said she did it. She's not going to cut a deal. She knows she deserves punishment. What do you fucking want?
I think it's interesting before she actually gets and here's why. Because there's this part where she's in Germany. She gets this interview with some magazine called Stern,
Yeah.
right? And Stern says, "Why don't you do a naked photo shoot with it? Because why not?" And she does. And she's just like, "I don't give a shit. Whatever. We need money because our crew doesn't have enough money." Meanwhile, I mean, the Bhagwan was proclaiming that she stole $43 or $45 million,
Okay. It is
which she did not.
1985. If she had $43 million in 1985, I don't even want to know how much that is in today's money.
That's
But
got to be close to $1 billion in our time money. But yeah,
but also, there was no fucking internet. She could have disappeared forever with $43 million. And instead of disappearing forever, she went to prison, did her time, got out, and got a fucking one of the worst, most emotionally and physically draining jobs I can fucking imagine. And she's doing it in her retirement years. If she had $43 million, none of that shit would have happened. I am sorry.
No,
I
agree.
How bad I felt about what I had done if I were her and I had $43 million. My name would be fucking Annie, no name, living in the fucking Bahamas.
Annie Doe.
Right. Like, come on. Nobody ends their life in their golden years as a hospice nurse if they got $43 million earning interest somewhere in a fucking Swiss bank. Nobody does
that. But the part that I found interesting about, not that she did a nude spread, who cares? But the idea that when she finally got arrested, the German guards were bringing this magazine, asking her to sign it.
I thought that was funny.
Which I thought was great. She's like, "Yeah, fuck it, here and sign it." Good for you.
I mean, whatever is going to get you just a little bit less manhandled, right?
Yeah, because they were getting manhandled in that prison.
So we're way over. So fast forward through all this shit. The Bhagwan is going to get indicted. Everybody's freaking out, and supposedly lawyer and company don't know he's going to flee, but he does. And supposedly the reason they couldn't get a hold of him on the plane to tell him you need to come back is because the government blocked their communications and not because he was
because they had jammers back then in the 80s, because that happens.
Well, yeah, and he was fleeing the country. He was going to the frickin' Bahamas with non-extradition treaty. They busted him in South Carolina, where they had to stop to refuel because it was a tiny plane.
Yep.
I don't know. What do you want to hit before we get to what happened to the ranch? Because that's fine for me.
I think it's funny that they found the Bhagwan hiding behind a seat.
Oh yeah, I do. It's
hiding behind a seat in a tiny plane is gonna they're not gonna find you. This isn't hide and seek, motherfucker.
But it's just this idea of him being and when he's in jail, they're and they treated this wonderful, beautiful man. He was so dignified, and it's he wasn't fucking dignified. He was crouched on the floor, hiding behind a seat, terrified because he's a weasel. He knew he was fucked.
Yes. So we have since Niran is his lawyer, he's the only sannyasin that's able to visit him in prison. So he can give him advice.
And he was just the same in that prison in those orange jumpsuits as he was in front of 10,000 people. And he's literally crying. And I don't want to kind of sound like I was making fun of him. I didn't mean it to. It broke my heart. Because he's telling the story.
Yeah. And he was crying now. Yeah. One thing I do want to talk about is, so now they have to extradite him to Charlotte, from Charlotte to Oregon.
Right.
And they take their good old fucking time transporting him back. 3 weeks. 3 fucking weeks. Now, I have real issue with that because I think that was shitty, and it was a point to break him down.
I agree.
And it was a dick move.
I've driven from Maryland to California in less than a week. And that was stopping to sleep and eat and everything else.
And they were flying him, and they would fly him to places. Stop, you're going to stay in this prison, maybe for a day, maybe 3. Then we're going to pick you up, and then we're going to take you to another prison. And they just did that, and that was needless. That was needless. And the prosecutors, whatever that fucking dork that was kept saying, like, well, we had to do this, like that guy, fuck him. Like the idea of doing that. Listen, I forget who said it, but someone said you can tell the character of a country by how they treat their prisoners.
I believe that's true. And this is the other thing is you have to remember the way that they were talking about. This is wild to me because they were treating him that poorly, but the way they were talking about Sheila was still that she was the one pulling all the strings.
Mm-hmm.
So like you can't even say like they let their emotions get the best of him and did this from an emotional place. Maybe they wouldn't have done it in other circumstances. Bullshit, because they didn't even think he was the bad guy. They really believed that Sheila was the fucking mother of all evil. She's the fucking mother of demons, whatever the fuck. But this guy, well, we get to abuse him. So why wouldn't we?
All right. So we have that whole thing. But in the midst of all this, Sheila and Jane both get sentenced.
Yeah.
Before he gets to that point. Sheila gets 4.5 years. Almost $500,000 in fines, which is an astronomical fucking number. In the 80s, that was what, fucking $25 million? Like that. That's an astronomical number. And she has to leave the U.S. as part of it after she's released. So she does her time, gets released,
and goes. Funny that 4 to 4.5 years is like the favorite sentence for women.
Yeah, that was in NXIVM. We saw that in NXIVM too. Remember, that was a favorite sentence there too.
But it's like, yeah, if you're a woman and you're in the high level of a cult, you're gonna get 4.5 years.
Yeah. The other person, Jane, she had more serious charges. She gets guilty of it. She pleads guilty to attempted murder, gets 10 years in federal prison. 10 years in federal prison is not for being a murder. You don't get white collar fucking easy prison. You get hard prison.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she gets to see
she was pretty graceful about that as well.
What's that?
She was pretty graceful about that as well. Like she understood,
she understood, yeah.
Yeah, like I did, this was fucking bad. Like
she understood that she committed some shit and she deserved it. And she mentions that her son Peter, who was still at Rajneeshpuram, actually came to visit her in prison, and she said that's actually what broke her free of Rajneeshism, was seeing him and how much he was hurt and confused by the whole thing.
I bet.
I bet that had to break her heart. I mean, she gets her heart broken worse, but so yeah. This is when we get to the point now where Niran tells him, despite hearing from experts, this is the weakest case ever. Niran magically says, I think you could beat this and we could beat this in 6 weeks, but you'll be on the stand every day and blah, 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 blah. So maybe you don't want to do that. How about you let me make a deal so you can leave? No,
Niran was not the lawyer anymore. He is saying that's what the other lawyers were telling him. And,
I thought he suggested it. Maybe they did.
Well, yeah. He's saying this is why I'm saying he's nuts, because maybe he thought they could beat it in 6 weeks, but it's like there's no way that his attorneys believed that they could beat the case in 6 weeks, and that it was they had no evidence and all of that. And they suggested he settle. That's fucking insane. It's just that's not a thing that happens. They would have happily taken it to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Yeah. So that happens. He basically pleads guilty and to fed immigration charges and agrees to leave the U.S. He leaves that night he gets to leave. Yeah. So he still has a shit ton of money in his pocket to be able to do that. So
yeah,
he basically goes back to Pune and is kind of brought back and is kind of still doing the same thing that he did in Rajneeshpuram back there.
Like I said, you can buy his books right now. You can buy shit with his quotes on them.
Even though he's no longer alive, but yeah.
Sorry, do you want to hit on like, you said Jane gets her heart broken more. You want to hit on that real quick?
Yeah. So Jane gets out after she does her time, and she runs a juice bar in Germany, which I find interesting. Meets her husband there because apparently her first husband, we never get clarity whether he passed away or
Yeah,
they
it's
just
kind of
divorced.
like at some point it became her and her daughter only.
Yeah.
And that's all
So Peter was back at Rajneesh. He stayed. My assumption is that the husband, like when things went weird, he just kind of left, and
Yeah.
her and the kids were there. While she finds out that her son has a brain tumor and he's in Australia, she couldn't go to Australia to be with her son because of the outstanding warrant she has for attempted murder, for a different warrant. And she talks to her husband, and they decide she got to face the warrant. She got to do it. She's hopeful that they will have mercy on her so that she can go see her son in Australia. And the judge is merciful. He says, time served. You served enough time in prison. She's able to go to Australia and be with her son as he passes away from brain cancer, which is fucking devastating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, like I said, Jane is a heart, like, she was easily pliable, I think, and she kind of was able to just be taken that way. But yeah.
I agree, but I think it's interesting that the moment she actually physically did something, she was like, I'm fucking done.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of, we don't see that a lot with people who are in as deep as she was. And so I think that's really, like, that says something about her character, something that was in there that was maybe trying to bubble out for a long time before this like point of breakage happened. Okay. 22 minutes over.
Yeah. It's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. No. So, well, it's 6 fucking episodes long, guys.
Yeah, let's try to stick to ones that are shorter, but this one was the one that started it all. So it's going to go over, and that's okay.
So eventually, Rajneeshpuram is, people of Antelope get their wish. It is dismantled. It is, the Rajneeshees are gone. Because the last fucking thing that anybody in Wasco County, Oregon wants is a bunch of religious people taking up space at that ranch. So what do they do with it, Doug?
Except,
what do they do with it, Doug?
Oh, you know what they do? They sell it to, they gets bought out by some billionaire who donates it to Young Life, which is a youth Christian group. Another fucking cult, by the way.
It is another cult. It's a really bad one.
Yeah.
This is one of these ones where these kids are horrifically abused, manual labor, just fucking bad shit. I'm going to tell you this. If it were just a Christian camp where people went to vacation Bible study or whatever, I'd still be fucking pissed. But it's gotta be one of these ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotta be one of these reformatory, fucking horrible, horrific fucking places. It's gotta be. And you know what? What are the people of Antelope doing about it?
Absolutely nothing.
Patting themselves on the back for a job well fucking done.
Because it's a bunch of white fucking Christians that are at that fucking thing. So, you know, that's why. Yeah. Can we talk a bit about Bhagwan's passing before we wrap this up?
Sure.
Yeah. So Bhagwan is not in good health. So he stops publicly speaking again. Niran went to India because he was feeling like he needed to be near Bhagwan again. Okay. Don't do that, but all right, dude, whatever.
A lot cooler if you didn't.
So he went, and he said the next day everybody got called in Buddha Hall, and they were told that he was passed. Now, Niran also said that he didn't want to be called Bhagwan anymore. He wanted to be called Osho, which is a Japanese term. So now listen, India is in Asia, but it is not Japanese.
Right. Because contrary to what a lot of white Americans believe, the cultures in Asia are all different and unique.
All of them. All of them.
Maybe especially fucking India compared to Japan. Of all, like, yeah.
Yeah. So, so he dies. They have a whole assembly about it, and so they brought the body into the hall, and then per the, I guess, his wishes or how it is in that religion, I'm unsure, but they burn his body, and everybody is there while they burn his body.
Well, remember there is no religion, so
Oh yeah, that's true. That's fair.
that was all Sheila's
Um,
colonel mastermind.
yeah, but it is a fucking religion. Whatever.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that Sheila later claims that Osho, as he's done a note at the end, had an overdose, and that's why they burned the body, so they couldn't do a tox screen on him.
I believe her. I mean, I think she's taking an educated guess. I don't know how she would actually know that, but I think that it makes sense, and she knows a lot about who he is and who the people closest to him are. And so I think it's very possible she is right. But
I think she's not far off the mark there. Yeah.
You hear anybody else being burned or even cremated.
Yeah. So apparently Niren said that Osho called him before he passed away and told him to write a book and clear his name in the United States. And that's what Niren is doing now, which is not going to work.
It's not, well, it's going to be so weird because there's already like this weird separation. This documentary came out years ago now. And I still encounter people who have no idea that Osho and the Rajneeshees are a thing, or people who just, there's a million things on Netflix. They didn't watch it. They don't know anything about it. I don't know. It could work. It could work just because people already don't fucking know what happened. So
yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah. So ta-da, folks. That is Wild Wild Country. This is the one that spawned Renee and I doing this. And
all right.
I am so thankful that we are doing this. I really am. It is it's so much fun for me.
Me too.
Yeah, and we get some people commenting, we have some people watching. That's great. I would do this if nobody's watching because I just enjoy doing this shit with you so much. I really do.
I'll throw this in at the end. A good friend of mine here locally is also really into cults, and she just got into the live stream, and she and I were talking about like what do you think it would take to open a cult museum? So maybe someday there's gonna be a cult museum.
A cult museum would be fucking awesome. I would figure out a way to get there as fast as I possibly could.
I mean, we don't know shit about any aspect of starting a museum, but this is what we were talking about yesterday.
Hey, you know what? We just talked about a bunch of people that didn't know shit about building a city, and they built a city. So yeah, you can do it.
That's fair. I'm at least as much of a mastermind as Ma'anan Sheila, I think. I'm just as bitchy too. So that's why I like her.
Yeah, but it's the kind of bitchy we love, so it's good.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about what we're doing next time. This is one that you had heard of and I had never heard of.
Yeah, I was following this like 2 or 3 years ago, and it kind of dropped off. And then now there's 2 documentaries about it, and we're going to watch the one that's actually out.
Yeah. So what we're going to talk about is there's 2 documentaries, one on Amazon Prime, one on Netflix. We are going to use the Netflix one as a reference point. I think you and I are both in the camp. We're going to watch both.
Yeah. I want to watch both. So, whatever. So like you at home, if you are the type that watches before you watch us, you don't have to watch both. You can pick one. But we kind of want to, because I'm going to revisit the Vanity Fair article where I first heard about these people as well. And so we just like bring a lot of stuff into it because this is fascinating to me. And I have a lot of opinions about how weird the twin flame thing is in New Age circles, because even without cults, it's super toxic and strange. And it's just going to be fun. It's going to be awful, but it's also going to be fun.
It's going to be awful. It's going to be awful, but yeah, it's going to be fun. So we're going to do this. It'll be on December 6th. Escaping Twin Flames is what we're watching. Yeah. So like I said, there's one on Amazon, there's one on Netflix. We're going to reference one on Netflix. We'll probably watch both. but I'm looking forward just because I know nothing about this, and these are the kinds of ones that I love because I'm going in completely blind, and I'm trying not to look.
I'm not going to tell you shit, but it's really wild. Just from what was in this article 2 years ago, and you have to assume 2-3 years ago this article came out, and then like something developments must have happened for years later. Now there's 2 documentaries coming out at the same time.
Yeah, that happens sometimes though. So yeah.
But yeah, like it's like 2 at the same time, but it broke in mainstream media like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So
well, we're gonna see what we see, I guess. This one is a much shorter. I think it's like the Netflix one is like 3 or 4 episodes, so it's not 6 episodes, and that's why we went over so much. But yeah, but it was good. So thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, everybody. Love you, folks. Love you, folks, and we'll see you next time.